we turn our attention to Eregion and Mordor in the late Second Age. In S.A. 1600, beneath the red slopes of Mount Doom, Sauron is said to have forged the One Ring. The Elves of Eregion had already made the Rings of Power, including the three, which Sauron had not touched. Over the centuries that followed, ruined Eregion, the kingdoms of Arna and Gondor, and the armies of the Last Alliance drew the story eastward to Orodruin. At Oster-Nedhill in the year S.A. 750, you are standing beneath the lamps of the Elven smith as evening gathers around Eregion. The city lies west of the misty mountains, among green slopes and grey stone, where water runs in narrow channels beside the streets. Inside the workshops, metal glows softly beneath the hammers. Polished silver rests beside pale gems, and the measured ringing rises and falls with the steadiness of breathing. Cedar smoke clings to the air. Oil darkens the woolen sleeves of the craftsmen. Through open doors, cool mountain air descends from the Redhorn Pass and moves quietly across your face. You are in Oster-Nedhill, the city of the Elves, chief settlement of Eregion and the heart of its growing craft. The Noldorin Elves founded Eregion in S.A. 750, choosing this land near the east gate of Khazad-dûm. Their city has no coast, no harbour, and no broad river leading towards distant kingdoms. Its long roads pass instead through mountain valleys and high paths, carrying messengers, ore, timber, cloth, and news. Around you, the principal guild of craftsmen is known as the Gwaithai Myrdain, the people of the jewelsmiths. Their benches stand close together beneath wooden rafters, and every surface bears some work in progress. A narrow blade lies beside a silver clasp. A crystal waits within a ring of charcoal. Thin wires of gold are arranged like sunlit grass. Each apprentice moves carefully, while older hands examine the smallest line and curve. The guild does not work in haste. You hear a hammer descend, pause, and descend again. Sparks rise briefly, then vanish. Across the room, a file whispers against metal. Somewhere beyond the inner wall, a bell gives one low note, marking the hour. The lamps are fed with clear oil, their flames shining across the benches. Water keeps running outside Oster-Nedhill, threading the channels with a sound softer than speech. At the center of this ordered city stands Celebrimbor, grandson of Feanor and ruler of Eregion during its greatest period. You see him moving between the benches without a crown, wearing a dark robe marked with fine dust. His face carries the grave patience of one who knows the weight of a famous house. Feanor had been the greatest craftsman of the Noldor, but his brilliance had been joined to pride, rebellion, and sorrow. Celebrimbor inherits that name, and with it the uneasiness of a troubled lineage. He has chosen another manner of greatness. In Oster-Nedhill, Celebrimbor listens before he speaks. He asks about the quality of a stone, the temper of a blade, and the source of a colour found in glass. His authority rests upon knowledge as much as blood. The smiths of the Gwaithai Myrdain respect him because he understands the work beneath their hands. He is their ruler, yet he is also one of them, surrounded by metal, gems, lamplight, and the quiet discipline of making. Beyond the city walls, the land rises gradually towards the mountains. You walk beneath birches and dark firs, following a road worn smooth by many feet. The path bends towards the east gate of Khazad-dûm, which the dwarves call the greatest of their mansions, beneath the mountains. Cold air comes down from the Redhorn Pass. It carries the scent of stone, pine resin, and distant snow. The road is narrow in places, with grass growing between the paving stones. To your left, streams descend from the higher slopes and join the channels running outside Oster-Nedhill. To your right, the mountains stand in long blue folds beneath the sky. Caravans travel this way between Eregion and Khazad-dûm, their pack animals stepping patiently over the uneven ground. Elven merchants bring worked silver, carved wood, fine cloth, and jewels. Dwarven traders bring ore, tools, stone, and objects whose strength depends upon years of hidden labor. Their exchange is deliberate, but it is also warm. The east gate appears first as a pale opening in the dark rock, set beneath a high wall of mountain stone. Lanterns burn near the threshold. Dwarves pass through with broad packs and iron-shod boots, while elves come and go beneath the carved archway. You feel the air change as you approach. The scent of cedar smoke gives way to mineral dust and cold water. From far within, Khazad-dûm comes a deep, distant sound, like a hammer striking the heart of the earth. The elves of Eregion trade with the dwarves of Khazad-dûm because both peoples understand the patience required by beautiful things. Their friendship grows along the road between the two realms. It grows in shared measurements, exchanged designs, and careful conversations beside the gate. Celebrimbor's craftsmen admire the dwarves' knowledge of stone and metal. The dwarves recognize in the elves a rare delicacy of hand and eye. Neither people speaks easily of trust, yet trust is forming. Back in Osten-Edhill, the evening deepens behind the windows. The workshop doors remain open, though the air has become colder. You sit near a wall where copper vessels hold the last warmth from the furnaces. The sleeves of the smiths smell of oil and cedar smoke. Fine filings glitter on the floor like dark sand. A shallow bowl of water trembles whenever a hammer falls, and the reflections of the lamps break into small golden fragments. The desire guiding these craftsmen is larger than ornament. They wish to preserve the loveliness of Middle-earth. They have seen the light diminish from older days, and they know that the world changes even when no hand touches it. Leaves fall. Rivers alter their courses. Memories grow thin at the edges. The elven smiths of Eregion believe that skill may hold beauty against this fading, not by stopping time, but by giving fragile things a form that can endure. You are standing beside a table where a gem has been set into silver. The stone is pale blue, almost clear, and it gathers the lamplight without seeming to burn. A craftsman turns it slowly between finger and thumb. Another examines the silver rim with a small lens. Their conversation is low and measured. They speak of color, proportion, and the hidden strength of the setting. Their work is not merely decoration. It is an attempt to remember the world as it appears before age and grief have passed over it. In the first years of the Second Age, the elves lived beneath the shadow of what had ended. One began after the defeat of Morgoth at the end of the First Age, when the old darkness was broken and the surviving peoples entered a changed world. You can feel that transition in the quiet confidence of Eregion. The war is over. The roads are open. The mountains no longer seem to guard an enemy, yet the memory of ruin remains in every careful hand. At the edge of the workshop, an old map hangs beneath a wooden frame. It shows the western lands, the mountains, the rivers, and the roads that connect distant peoples. In one corner, a small island is marked far across the sea. In A32, Númenorian settlers first reached the island of Númenor, beginning another strand of the history that will shape the Second Age. The news has traveled slowly to Eregion, carried by ships to western shores, and then by roads towards the mountains. Eregion has no coast, and its people depend upon roads through the mountain passes for long-distance contact. Messages arrive after many weeks, sometimes altered by repetition and weather. A trader may speak of Númenor as a green island of tall trees and long beaches, while another remembers only the sound of gulls. From the western lands come letters, metals, stories, and rumors. Each journey confirms the sense that Middle-earth is broad, connected, and still full of possibilities. The night outside has become clear. Above Osten-Edhill, the stars appear between the black branches of the trees. Cold mountain air flows from the Redhorn Pass, brushing the city roofs and stirring loose fibers on the cloaks of the guards. Water runs in channels beside the walls. A few lamps burn under covered porches. The last carts return from the eastern road, their wheels passing softly over the stones. Somewhere within the city, a late hammer sounds once, then becomes still. According to the chronology of the Second Age, Sauron began to rebuild his power in Middle-earth around S.A. 500. In Eregion, that distant movement is not yet understood. The name carries memories of old terror, but the workshops continue their work. The smiths are occupied with beauty, with improvement, and with the possibility that the world might be made more enduring through craft. Their confidence is sincere. The roads remain open. The east gate of Khazad-dûm stands nearby, and no shadow has yet crossed the threshold. For time, Galadriel and Celeborn are associated with Eregion in Tolkien's writings. You hear their names spoken with respect in the city, not as rulers seated upon a distant throne, but as figures connected with the larger life of the Noldor. Galadriel understands the strength and danger within the Elven desire to preserve. Celeborn knows the forests and rivers of Middle-earth and carries the quiet attention of one who watches living things closely. In later years, they will dwell in Lothlorien, but here their presence belongs to an earlier season. The chambers where they sometimes meet are warmer than the public workshops. Cedar logs burn in a shallow hearth, and the smoke leaves slowly through a narrow opening in the roof. Woolen cushions lie along the walls. A bronze basin holds water gathered from the nearby streams. You hear the soft movement of fabric when someone turns, and the small click of a cup placed upon a table. Beyond the shutters, the city continues its patient sounds, with footsteps, flowing water, and the faint ringing of hammers. Galadriel is not indifferent to the work of Eregion. She knows that beauty can shelter memory, and that memory can preserve wisdom. Yet she also recognizes the restlessness beneath the guild's purpose. The smiths wish to resist the fading of Middle-earth, and their wish is noble. Still, any desire to hold the world unchanged may become a desire to possess it. Celebrimbor listens to such cautions, though the sound of invention is strong within him. In S.A. 750, Eregion is still young, though its name already carries promise. The Noldorin founders have laid streets around Ostenedhill, raised walls, opened workshops, and established routes towards the mountain gate. The city's strength comes from concentration. Its finest minds work close together. Its principal guild, the Gwaith-i-Myrdain, has become a community within the community, bound by standards of secrecy, excellence, and shared ambition. You cross a courtyard paved with pale stone. Rain has fallen earlier, and the surface reflects the lamps in broken pools. Water moves through narrow channels at the courtyard's edge. The air smells of wet leaves, cedar smoke, and oil carried on woolen sleeves. A row of silver objects rests beneath a covered awning, each protected from the damp. Their surfaces catch the light whenever the clouds shift above the roofs. Among the craftsmen, Celebrimbor is spoken of as a ruler who has inherited more than a title. He is heir to Feanna's genius, but also to the sorrow that followed it. The old stories tell of duels, oaths, exile, and the long ruin of a house that could not release what it had made. Celebrimbor's position in Eregion therefore carries a quiet tension. He wishes to honor the past without repeating it. He wishes to make works worthy of his lineage without becoming captive to that lineage. The first mention of a helpful stranger comes only after the workshops have become familiar. For many evenings, you have watched the same patterns of labor: ore heated, metal poured, stone selected, silver polished, and designs revised beneath the lamps. Then, much later in the Second Age, a traveler arrives along the Western Road, bearing knowledge of craft and lore that seems unusually complete. He is fair of face, courteous in speech, and willing to advise the Gwaith-i-Myrdain without demanding authority. The stranger calls himself Annatar, the Lord of Gifts. His clothing is plain but finely made. Dust from the mountain road rests upon his boots. He speaks of ancient arts, of powers once known in the elder days, and of methods by which the elves might preserve what they love. He does not arrive as a conqueror. He comes with patient words, open hands, and an understanding of the longing that already lives inside Eregion. To Celebrimbor, his counsel appears generous. You are near the forge when Annatar first examines a newly shaped band of gold. The metal is warm beneath his hand. Light runs along its edge. He speaks quietly about balance and hidden strength, while the smiths gather around him. The measured ringing of hammers continues in the adjoining room. Cedar smoke drifts through the doorway. Outside, the air from the Redhorn Pass has grown cold, and the channels beside Ostenedhill carry rainwater towards the lower fields. The Gwaithimerdane welcomes the stranger's knowledge. Some among them have lived through long ages and still feel the weariness of change. They have watched kingdoms rise and disappear. They have seen forests altered, shores moved, and old languages become strange even to those who once spoke them. Annatar offers a way to resist such loss. His teaching seems to promise that beauty may be secured, strengthened, and held beyond the reach of ordinary decay. Celebrimbor studies the stranger's methods with particular attention. He recognizes a discipline equal to his own, perhaps greater in certain hidden aspects. The grandson of Faerna feels the old family hunger for achievement, but he also feels the possibility of surpassing it. In Ostenedhill, beneath the lamps, the work grows more intricate. Gold is joined to silver. Gems are arranged according to patterns of power. The smiths speak less while they labor, and the city becomes increasingly absorbed in its craft. At the east gate of Khazad-dûm, the relationship between elves and dwarves remains steady. Traders continue to cross the threshold. The dwarves send ore from deep chambers beneath the mountains. The elves return worked metal, glass, carved wood, and ornaments of remarkable delicacy. The road between Eregion and Khazad-dûm is familiar now, marked by repeated footsteps and the turning of wheels. Even the mountain weather seems part of its routine. You travel along that road beneath a sky the color of pewter. The Redhorn Pass is hidden by cloud, but cool air comes down from its heights. Pine branches stir above you. Water slips over dark stones and gathers in shallow pools beside the path. A dwarven cart creaks somewhere beyond the trees. From Ostenedhill, the sound of hammers reaches you faintly, softened by distance, until it resembles rain upon a roof. Within the city, the ambition of the smiths continues to grow. Their work will eventually include the rings of power, made in Eregion during the Second Age. The rings will not begin as instruments of open domination in the minds of the elves. They emerge from a longing to preserve, to strengthen, and to guard the beautiful things of Middle-earth. Yet power is never only what its makers intend. A vessel may carry pure water or poison, depending upon what is poured into it. The first objects are handled with reverence. You see them placed upon dark cloth, beneath lamps whose flames have been turned low. Their surfaces are smooth and cool. Their forms are simple enough to seem almost inevitable. Around them, the craftsmen stand silently, aware that something has entered the world which did not exist before. The room smells of metal, oil, and cedar smoke. Beyond the walls, water runs through Ostenedhill, unchanged and indifferent. The desire to preserve beauty is woven through every part of Eregion. The smiths do not wish to watch Middle-earth fade into grey recollection. They want leaves to remain bright, stone to keep its newness, and memory to retain the warmth of the first moment. The wish is understandable. It has guided their hands for centuries. In the quiet halls of the Gwaithimerdane, even the smallest ornament becomes a reply to time. You stand beneath a lintel carved with leaves and stars. The stone is cool against your shoulder. A lamp burns above you, its light wavering whenever the door opens towards the mountain air. On the floor, fine dust gathers in the joints between the paving stones. Somewhere nearby, a file moves in slow strokes. Someone pours water into a basin. The city feels sheltered, although the mountains are close enough to fill the sky. The stranger Annatar remains among the smiths, offering instruction and encouragement. He knows how to make his presence seem natural. He does not demand that Eregion change its customs. He praises the skill already present in Ostenedhill, then suggests that greater works are possible. His gifts appear to honor the elves' own abilities. Under his influence, the craftsmen begin to imagine objects that might endure beyond kingdoms, beyond roads, and beyond the memories of ordinary peoples. Celebrimbor rules Eregion at the height of its confidence. His house remains troubled by the old shadow of Faerna, yet his city appears to have escaped the harsher patterns of the past. He has the friendship of skilled craftsmen, the respect of the dwarves of Khazad-dûm, and the companionship of a people who believe that their greatest work is still ahead. Galadriel and Celeborn remain associated with the region before their later dwelling in Lothlorien, and their presence adds depth to the city's long conversation about power and preservation. Evening settles over Ostenedhill in layers. The roofs darken first, then the trees become silhouettes. At last, the windows and doorways hold the city's remaining light. Water running in channels outside Ostenedhill reflects the lamps in thin, wavering lines. The cold air from the Redhorn Pass touches the courtyards. Cedar smoke rises from the workshops and mingles with the scent of wet wool. The hammers continue, measured and calm. The history of Eregion survives chiefly in Tolkien's Appendices, the Silmarillion, and unfinished tales. Through those fragments, the city appears briefly and brightly, like a lamp seen across a dark valley. You can trace its founding, its guild, its friendship with Khazad-dûm, and the work of Celebrimbor. You can follow the names of Galadriel, Celeborn, Annatar, and the Gwaith-i-Myrdain. Yet the surviving account leaves spaces between the events, and into those spaces the quiet life of the city may be imagined. You walk through the streets while the lamps are being covered for the night. The paving stones hold a little warmth from the day. Rainwater passes beneath small bridges. A shutter closes above you, and a soft voice speaks from within a house. Along the walls, ivy moves in the breeze. The mountain air is cool but not bitter. Far away, a hammer strikes metal once, and the sound travels between the buildings before dissolving into the dark. At this early height, Eregion is at peace. Its gates remain open. The road to Khazad-dûm is busy with trade. The Gwaith-i-Myrdain works beneath bright lamps, and Celebrimbor's authority rests upon confidence in the future. The elves believe that their craft may preserve the loveliness of Middle-earth. They believe that wisdom, friendship, and skill can protect what time would otherwise take away. The stranger among them seems helpful. Nothing has yet revealed the full shape of his purpose. You are standing near the western gate of Ostenedhill. The city lies quiet behind you. Ahead, the road fades between trees and low hills. Cool air moves down from the Redhorn Pass. Water murmurs beside the stones. A final thread of cedar smoke hangs above the roofs. The lamps grow dim. The hammers rest. Silver waits beneath the dustless cloth, and pale gems hold the last small gleams of light. At dawn, a figure appears upon the eastern road, walking without escort beneath the dark green hills. His white robes carry no dust, and his hands remain open as he approaches the guarded gate. You hear no marching feet, no horns, and no iron striking against iron. The visitor pauses before the carved stones, bows with measured courtesy, and waits for permission to enter. The gatewardens study his calm expression, noticing neither weapon nor emblem upon his clothing. Behind you, the city begins its slow awakening, with shutters opening and distant voices crossing the courtyards. A faint scent of heated bronze drifts from the workshops, mingling with the cool fragrance of wet earth. The visitor's face appears fair, composed, and strangely untouched by weariness. Rain has passed during the night, leaving the roofs of Ostenedhill dark and shining beneath a pale morning. Water gathers in narrow channels beside the road, reflecting fragments of white cloud and green slope. The stranger's robe stands clearly against the hills, bright as polished bone, beneath the subdued sky. Somewhere within the city, a single hammer touches metal, then falls silent again. The visitor gives a name, and you hear it carried inward through the gate by careful voices. He calls himself Annatar, the Lord of Gifts, a title shaped to sound gracious and ancient. He claims to be an emissary of the Valar, sent from the west with knowledge intended to improve the arts of the elves. His words contain no threat, and his courtesy makes refusal seem almost impolite. You stand near the gatehouse, while Annatar speaks with the first messengers from the smiths. He describes methods of joining metals, preserving color in jewels, and giving lasting strength to delicate forms. Each proposal arrives with such precise detail that the listeners begin imagining finished objects before the lesson has even begun. The stranger offers no demand in return, only patience, attention, and another carefully measured explanation. A thin brightness spreads across the wet paving stones, though the upper hills remain veiled in vapor. Drops fall from the branches with soft, irregular sounds, striking leaves, leather, and shallow pools beneath the walls. The air carries the faint scent of heated bronze from distant furnaces, where coals are being stirred back into life. Around you, quiet footsteps gather near the gate, drawn by the calm voice beyond it. News of Annatar travels westward to Lindon, where Gil-galad, High King of the Elves, receives the report with immediate caution. He has known the long shadows cast by false promises and does not accept the stranger's claim without question. The elves of Lindon warn Eregion against receiving him, sending their message along roads still wet with rain. Elrond also distrusts Annatar, though he speaks with the restraint expected of a wise herald. In Lindon, the warning is read beneath stone roofs while rain returns to the coast. Water threads down the walls and gathers along the windowsills, blurring the grey sea beyond. The parchment rests beside a bronze weight, a seal, and a collection of measured tools. Voices remain low within the chamber, and each sentence seems softened by the weather pressing patiently against the house. You hear the message repeated in Oster-Nedhill, first by envoys, and later by anxious servants carrying it between courtyards. Gil-galad rejects Annatar's approach, and Elrond's distrust gives the refusal a second voice. Yet the smiths of Eregion are more willing to listen than the High King. They have spent generations pursuing beauty through craft, and the stranger speaks directly to that hunger. The workshops stand beneath broad roofs of dark stone, their doors open towards the damp streets. Inside, bronze glows faintly in clay bowls, while silver catches the thin light from high windows. Diagrams lie flat upon wooden tables, weighted at their corners against the moving air. Quiet voices pass over lines, angles, measures, and names for processes that had previously remained half understood. Annatar enters the workshops without ceremony, leaving his attendants outside and placing no claim upon the central benches. He bends over the diagrams with the smiths, correcting a proportion here and extending a pattern there. His lessons spread through the rooms by patient instruction, never hurried and never burdened with unnecessary mystery. You watch the elves lean closer, grateful for an answer arriving precisely when uncertainty begins to trouble them. Beyond the doors, rain gathers on the stone roofs and falls in narrow silver streams. The sound forms a steady veil around the workshop, muting carts, footsteps, and distant voices from the streets. Heated bronze gives the room a dry, mineral fragrance, while wet wool releases the scent of the morning weather. Under the lamps, measured tools lie in orderly rows, each one resting within easy reach. The name Annatar does not describe a benevolent deity, although its gentle meaning encourages the elves to hear it that way. It is an assumed title selected by Sauron for the impression it creates in willing minds. You can see the hidden intention behind the fair appearance, while most of the elves see only a refined teacher from an honored realm. His beauty conceals the identity he has chosen to hide. Sauron had previously served Morgoth, the first Dark Lord, whose power sought open ruin across Middle-earth. After Morgoth's defeat, Sauron did not abandon his desire to command what remained. He sought order through domination rather than open destruction alone, believing that all peoples could be arranged beneath a single will. The language of gifts allowed that ambition to enter places where armies would have been refused. The hills around Ostenedhill deepen into dark green beneath another passing cloud. Moss softens the lower stones, and wet leaves cling to the edges of the road. From the city comes the muted rhythm of work resumed, sometimes clear, sometimes nearly lost beneath the dripping branches. Annatar's white robes remain visible between the buildings, a bright figure moving through shadow with untroubled purpose. The smiths begin asking questions that Gil-galad would not have permitted them to ask in Lindon. They inquire about preserving living radiance, binding unlike substances, and storing power within crafted forms. Annatar answers each question with careful generosity, revealing enough to deepen their confidence while keeping the larger design within his own knowledge. The comfort of his teaching becomes dangerous precisely because every detail proves useful. You stand beside a table covered with sketches, noticing how the lines grow more elaborate from day to day. The tools bear traces of oil, charcoal, and fine metallic dust, while the paper edges curl slightly in the warm air. A faint ringing travels through the workshop whenever a small hammer meets a prepared surface. Above that sound, quiet voices continue discussing diagrams and measured tools. Annatar never presents himself as a conqueror, and no guard sees a reason to bar his passage. He speaks of balance, refinement, and abilities already sleeping within the hands of the elves. His apparent purpose is to improve the arts, not to command kingdoms or reshape loyalties. Yet his deeper aim is to dominate the peoples of Middle-earth through crafted objects of power. The city changes gradually under his influence, not through laws or proclamations, but through altered habits of attention. Smiths begin reserving the finest materials for experiments derived from Annatar's instructions. Apprentices copy his diagrams late into the evening, while older craftsmen compare his methods with traditions carried from distant generations. The stranger's knowledge seems generous and precise, and therefore difficult to distrust. Evening settles across Eregion with a soft grey pressure, turning the hills into layered silhouettes beyond the walls. Lamps brighten beneath the eaves, and rainwater ticks from gutters into shallow basins beside the doors. The smell of heated bronze remains in the air, mingling with ash, damp stone, and the faint sweetness of crushed herbs. Annatar's pale clothing catches each lamp as he passes. Gil-galad's warning does not disappear, though it becomes less frequently spoken within the workshops. Some smiths consider the High King's caution prudent, but distant, belonging to a court far from the practical difficulties of creation. Elrond's distrust is treated with greater respect, yet even his measured words struggle against the pleasure of discovering a new method. Annatar understands that useful knowledge can make suspicion feel unnecessarily severe. Along the western coast, rain falls once more upon the stone roofs of Lindon. You imagine the sound travelling through quiet halls while messengers wait beneath covered galleries. Elrond stands near a narrow window, looking towards the dim coast, and the High King listens without interrupting. Their concern remains firm, though Eregion lies far away beyond hills, rivers, and roads. In Ostenedhill, the stranger's lessons become part of ordinary work, and his presence begins to seem inevitable. He teaches the ordering of alloys, the careful tempering of blades, and the patient shaping of jewels for purposes beyond ornament. He speaks as though every difficulty possesses a rational solution, provided the maker accepts sufficient discipline. The smiths hear wisdom in that confidence and overlook the will beneath it. A cool wind moves down from the Redhorn Pass, carrying the scent of pine and distant rain into the city. It passes over the roofs, through narrow streets, and beneath workshop doors where shavings gather in pale curls. Bronze cools within its molds, giving off a faint warmth that lingers against your face. Somewhere nearby, A tool is set carefully upon wood rather than dropped. The principal rings begin to take shape through knowledge Annatar has helped make available. Their making belongs to the skill and imagination of the elves, yet the path towards them has been opened by a stranger whose identity remains hidden. You see Sauron standing at the edge of their achievement, observing each decision with the patience of one measuring a future possession. His fair form gives no outward sign of the darkness behind it. The workshops grow quieter when the most delicate work is underway. Voices fall to murmurs, and tools move with restrained precision across benches darkened by years of use. Diagrams are weighted with bronze scraps, their markings surrounded by dust from cut stone and powdered metal. Outside, rain brushes the roof in a fine, continuous pattern, while the city holds its breath around the labor. Annatar's influence does not depend upon every elf loving him, because he requires only enough trust to guide the work. He praises accuracy, remembers small imperfections, and offers corrections without humiliating those who made them. Such manners create an atmosphere of safety around his instruction, even when the knowledge leads beyond familiar boundaries. You feel the dangerous comfort of receiving answers from someone who appears incapable of impatience. The road from Lindon to Eregion lies beneath a washed and colorless sky. Streams cross the stones in narrow ribbons, and the dark green hills rise gradually towards the eastern passes. Rain remains caught upon the branches, falling whenever the wind disturbs them. Far beyond the western horizon, Gil-galad's warning continues to stand, though its force weakens with every successful experiment. Sauron remembers the service he once gave Morgoth and understands that open ruin has limits. Destruction can empty a land, but domination can preserve its labor, wealth, and obedience. Through Annatar, he offers the elves a structure in which power may be gathered, counted, and directed. The promise of order becomes the polished surface over a deeper desire to rule. One morning, you see Annatar standing beside a window while the smiths work below him. His white robes contrast with the blackened beams and green slopes beyond the glass. He watches the hands of the elves with an expression of patient interest, as though their discoveries were unfolding exactly as expected. The light touches his face, and its fairness becomes almost difficult to endure. The city smells of rain, warm stone, lamp oil, and bronze recently drawn from the furnace. Water slides from the roof edges and strikes the flagstones in different rhythms, producing no single repeated pattern. A breeze passes through the open shutters, lifting the corners of several diagrams before a smith steadies them. The room remains calm, though the knowledge within it has begun traveling farther than its makers understand. By now, you recognize what the title conceals. Annatar is not a benevolent power descending to bless the elves, but a former servant of Morgoth seeking a more durable form of mastery. The Lord of Gifts is a garment laid over ambition, carefully shaped for those who wish to believe in generous instruction. His fair appearance continues to protect him from the eyes of most who meet him. The principal rings are eventually made in Eregion, and their beauty exceeds the expectations of those who first imagined them. Their surfaces hold colors like still water, and their workmanship carries the quiet confidence of many years. Annatar has departed by the time the work reaches its highest refinement, yet his instruction remains woven through the knowledge of the smiths. The stranger leaves behind methods, diagrams, and dangerous confidence. The departure comes without battle, proclamation, or sudden change in the streets. Annatar gathers what belongs to him, offers courteous farewells, and walks eastward beyond the walls of Ostenedhill. The smiths watch from the gate, some grateful, some uncertain, and some already turning towards the next experiment. No one sees an enemy marching away, because the enemy arrived as a teacher. Evening mist gathers along the road as it disappears between the low hills. The last light rests upon wet grass, black branches, and pale stones beneath your feet. Annatar's white robes become smaller with distance, then dissolve into the grey air beyond the trees. Behind you, the workshops still glow faintly, holding the warmth of furnaces and the secrets of measured craft. You remain upon the eastern road after the stranger has vanished, listening to water move beside the stones. Ostenedhill lies behind you, quiet beneath its dark roofs, while the paths ahead lead towards lands not yet aware of what has been prepared. The scent of heated bronze lingers faintly upon the evening air. Somewhere in the city, a diagram is being folded and placed beneath a cloth. Sauron has left Eregion, but his purpose has not left with him. The knowledge he offered continues through the hands of the smiths, and the rings carry that knowledge beyond the workshops. You can sense his design widening across Middle-earth, not as a storm arriving at once, but as a network of quiet decisions. His order will depend upon objects, obedience, and trust created by useful gifts. Night descends over the hills, smoothing the road into shadow. Rain begins again upon the stone roofs, first lightly, and then with a steady hush that fills the narrow streets. Lamps fade behind shuttered windows, and the final sounds of work withdraw beneath the weather. Far along the eastern road, the mist closes over every footprint left by Annatar. The title remains in the memories of those who heard it, though its meaning will darken with time. Annatar, the Lord of Gifts, was never the name of a kindly deity guiding the elves towards harmless perfection. It was a chosen title, adopted after Morgoth's defeat, when domination seemed more useful than ruin. The fair stranger has gone, and the danger remains within what he taught. You stand once more beside the stones of the gate, with dark green hills surrounding the sleeping city. Rain has cooled the paving, and the air carries only a faint trace of cedar, smoke from the houses behind you. Beneath covered benches, silver and jewels wait in silence, while the principal rings rest beyond your sight. The road disappears east beneath the night mist, carrying the secrets of Eregion into the wider world. You remain beside the gate of Eregion as evening deepens, while the stranger's road fades beneath the mist, and the city gathers its quiet around you. Rain has darkened the stones, and cedar smoke drifts lightly from the houses beyond the walls. Within the guild courts, covered benches shelter silver, gold, and colored stones from the damp air. Linen-wrapped rings rest in wooden trays, each small form holding the patient labor of many hours. The smell of charcoal clings to the doorways, mingling with the sharper scent of quenched metal. Far above the roofs, clouds pass slowly across the first stars. You hear no hammer now, only the occasional settling of timber and the soft movement of water along the gutters. The danger remains within what Annatar taught, although his teaching still resembles craft, order, and useful knowledge. At first, the Elven smiths treat the new methods as experiments, testing one alloy against another and comparing the strength of different settings. You move among the guild houses, while apprentices measure fragments of mithril, silver, gold, and iron beneath steady oil lamps. Annatar's instruction gives each trial a direction, and the workers begin to recognize patterns that had previously remained hidden. A ring made for endurance is altered by a finer proportion of silver, while one intended to preserve beauty receives a different balance of stone and metal. The experiments are recorded on thin tablets, then repeated until their results become reliable. Celebrimbor observes much and speaks little, allowing the workshops to learn through their own hands. Outside, the courtyards fill with the low rhythm of industry, and uncertain studies begin to become disciplined practice. The days acquire a regular movement, like water following a familiar channel through stone. You enter one guild house at dawn and find small flames reflected in red and blue stones upon the work tables. In another chamber, files whisper over narrow bands of metal, while charcoal settles into the wool of your cloak. A third room holds basins of dark water, where newly quenched pieces cool beneath drifting steam. Linen-wrapped rings are arranged in wooden trays according to their alloys, their surfaces dulled by soot until they receive their final polishing. Mithril's cold sheen appears whenever a cloth passes over it, pale and distant beneath the amber light. The work continues through rain and clear weather alike. Even the pauses possess a measured quality, for every tool is returned to its place before the next operation begins. By S.A. 1500, the greater rings of power begin to be forged, and the experiments have become a rhythm of production across the guild houses. You watch the smiths carry prepared blanks from one chamber to another, each craftsman adding a precise contribution to the growing design. 16 rings are made by the Elven smiths under the influence of Annatar's teaching, though the hands that shape them belong to workers of Eregion. Some are made with strength and endurance in mind, while others are associated with wealth, skill, or the preservation of ancient possessions. Their purposes are not yet divided into the later names of 7 and 9. They rest together in trays, indistinguishable to an untrained eye, while the larger pattern remains beyond the understanding of those who serve within it. In the workshops, the work seems orderly, beautiful, and capable of being controlled. The metal cools gradually in the quiet rooms, losing the bright violence of the forge and taking on the subdued colors of finished work. You stand beside a stone basin as a craftsman lifts a ring from the water with narrow tongs. Vapor rises around his hands, carrying the smell of quenched metal into the rafters. On a nearby bench, charcoal breaks into soft grey pieces beneath a rake. A ruby catches one of the small flames and returns it as a deep red point, while a blue stone beside it holds a colder reflection. The rings remain separated by wooden dividers, and the linen around them is folded with almost ceremonial care. Beyond the walls, the rain has stopped. Drops descend from the eaves at slow intervals, marking time more gently than any clock. The production of the 16 rings teaches the guild's efficiency, yet it also makes their labor less personal. You hear fewer discussions about the origin of each metal and more conversations about proportion, sequence, and result. Annatar moves from house to house, correcting a measurement here and suggesting an alteration there. His knowledge appears generous because it is offered without visible reluctance. Celebrimbor permits the collaboration to continue, for the rings are becoming finer, stronger, and more responsive to the intentions placed within them. The workers do not yet perceive a contradiction between mastery and dependence. They believe they are expanding their craft through disciplined study. The future association of the 7 with dwarves and of the 9 with men has not yet been determined. For now, they are simply 16 achievements resting beneath the lamps of Eregion. Night settles over the city, and the warmth of the forges becomes more noticeable as the outer air grows cold. You pass through a covered arcade where rainwater gleams between the paving stones. The wooden beams above you carry the scent of old resin, while workshop doors breathe out smoke and metal. Somewhere nearby, a file moves in slow strokes across a ring shaped too thickly. Elsewhere, a hammer touches an anvil with careful restraint, producing a soft note rather than a ringing blow. Small flames lean within their dishes as air moves through the room. Mithril's cold sheen lies along the edge of a half-finished band, and blue reflections tremble upon its surface. The city feels protected by its own enclosure, though the road east remains open and the world beyond Eregion is wide. The greater rings provide a foundation, but Celebrimbor now turns towards a more exact expression of his own purpose. You find him in a quieter chamber, where fewer tools are arranged and the windows are narrow. The work there does not follow the same sequence as the other rings. Each decision is considered at length, and every stone is examined beneath several kinds of light. Celebrimbor knows what Annatar has taught, yet he does not surrender the final movement of his craft to another hand. He begins to shape 3 rings as a separate achievement, made after the others, and conceived with a different balance of intention. Their power is meant to preserve and protect rather than dominate. Their design does not depend upon command, fear, or the bending of another will. You feel the difference before the forms are complete, because the room itself seems less hurried than the larger workshops. The tables are covered with clean linen, and wooden trays hold only a few pieces at a time. A narrow window admits a pale stripe of morning light, revealing the cold sheen of mithril beside a white stone. The stone is smooth and quiet, without the sharp glitter of a cut jewel. Nearby, red and blue stones reflect small flames, their colors trembling whenever the air shifts. The smell of charcoal is faint in this chamber, though quenched metal still leaves a mineral trace upon the water. Each object appears to be waiting rather than advancing. Outside, a breeze touches the leaves of the trees, and they answer with a sound like distant silk. Celebrimbor makes the 3 rings without Sauron's direct presence, and the distinction becomes important within the history of Eregion. You stand near the doorway while the final stages are carried out by Celebrimbor and those he trusts. Annatar is absent from the chamber, and none of his hands touches the tools or the metal. The 3 are made after the other rings, when Celebrimbor has absorbed the teaching but begun to follow a purer line of his own craft. They are not physically touched by Sauron. Their making remains connected to the knowledge introduced into Eregion, yet their immediate creation belongs to Celebrimbor alone. The room contains no dramatic sign of separation. There is only the measured sound of work, the quiet turning of metal, and the concentration of a smith who understands that beauty must also endure. The first of the 3 is Narya, the ring of fire, associated with warmth, courage, and the preservation of living strength. You see its surface catch the glow of a small flame, not brightly, but with a steady inner redness. The light resembles an ember beneath ash, calm enough to endure the passing of night. The second is Nenya, the ring of water, made with mithril and a white stone whose color seems to hold the clarity of still water. Its pale surface reflects the room without distorting it. The third is Vilya, the ring of air, and the greatest of the 3. Its form appears lighter than the others, as though the surrounding space has been permitted to gather around it. Narya, Nenya, and Vilya rest apart from the 16, each bearing a distinct character. Cool air enters through the high openings and moves across your face, carrying the scent of wet leaves from the gardens. The forge behind you gives off a low warmth, but the chamber remains temperate and clear. A red stone holds the reflection of one flame, while a blue stone receives another and returns it as a small pool of color. Nenya lies upon dark cloth, its white stone quiet against the deep surface. Mithril's cold sheen gathers around the setting, silver without harshness. Along the wall, linen-wrapped rings rest in wooden trays, their shapes softened by the fabric. A worker closes the shutters one by one, and the room grows dimmer without becoming dark. After the final hammer stroke, stillness settles over the benches, as though the metal itself has begun to listen. In the 3, preservation has a concrete meaning that can be understood by anyone who has watched a garden survive winter. You see a wall repaired before rain enters, a lamp kept burning through a long night, and a book protected from damp so its pages remain legible. Their purpose is to sustain what is already precious, allowing memory, courage, and beauty to remain present through the passage of time. Domination follows another path. It seeks to impose a single will upon many lives, making another person's movement answer to command. The 3 are not shaped for that purpose. Their strength lies in sheltering rather than possessing. The distinction is quiet, but within it lies the difference between a guarded flame and a fire set against a city. The completed rings rest in silence, while the larger design remains unseen. You find them placed in separate trays, covered with folded linen whenever the chamber is left unattended. Narya carries the association of fire, Nenya of water, and Vilya of air. Their names are spoken softly by those permitted to know them, then allowed to fall back into the calm of the workshop. The 16 earlier rings remain elsewhere in Eregion, their purposes still woven into the teaching received from Annatar. Nothing in the quiet appearance of the three reveals the future division between 7 and 9. They seem to belong only to their makers and to the peaceful work of the city. Yet beyond the western lands, all has begun to gather around the knowledge that made their creation possible. S.A. 1590 marks the completion of the three according to the standard chronology, and the year passes without outward disturbance in Eregion. You walk beneath trees whose leaves have begun to yellow at their edges, while messengers carry sealed records between the guild houses. Naria, Nenya, and Villia are examined, wrapped, and stored with a care exceeding the given to ordinary works. Celebrimbor studies each ring in turn, searching for flaws that do not appear in the metal. He understands that the three are not merely additional examples of the methods learned from Annatar. They are the purest achievement of his craft, made without Sauron's direct presence or physical touch. The city continues its routines, unaware that the most beautiful work in Eregion has also become the most dangerous to conceal. Morning enters through thin clouds, turning the wet roof soft grey and the garden paths muted green. You stand beside an open window and hear water descend from a chain into a stone basin. The sound is regular, but never quite identical, because each drop chooses its own place upon the surface. In the room, a tray of rings waits beneath linen, and the cloth carries a faint scent of cedar. Mithril catches the diluted daylight with a cold, restrained sheen. The charcoal fires are low after the night's work, and pale ash lies around the iron grates. A red stone and a blue stone reflect separate flames, though the colors meet upon the polished edge of a tool. The air smells of rain, smoke, and quenched metal, while the three remain hidden from every casual glance. The other rings are now distributed according to purposes shaped by the unseen architecture of Annatar's instruction. You hear the guild masters speak of works intended for powerful peoples beyond Eregion, and the language of exchange begins to enter their careful conversations. The 7 are later given to dwarves, whose ancient halls lie deep beneath mountains, and whose rulers value endurance, stone, and accumulated wealth. The 9 are later given to men, whose lives are shorter and whose desire for power can be turned towards service. At the time of their making, these future recipients are not present in the workshops. The rings lie in ordered trays, waiting for journeys not yet planned. Their distribution will reveal a design more extensive than the elves of Eregion had imagined. The corridors are cooler now, and the warmth of the forges fades before it reaches the outer courtyards. You pass beneath a lintel darkened by years of smoke, where charcoal remains embedded in the wood. The stones underfoot are smooth from long use, with shallow hollows polished by countless steps. In a side room, linen-wrapped rings rest in wooden trays beside sealed boxes of tools. A draught lifts one corner of the cloth, exposing a brief glimmer of mithril before the fabric settles again. From the forge comes the muted scrape of tongs against iron. Then the sound stops, and the stillness extends through the building. Beyond the doors, branches move lightly beneath the evening wind, and the city's lamps begin to appear. For a time, the elves believe that skill can remain separate from intention. You watch Celebrimbor receive reports from the guild houses, each account showing that the rings have been made according to agreed methods. The results are excellent, and excellence makes suspicion difficult. Annatar has not openly demanded obedience, nor has he presented himself as a conqueror. He has taught, advised, and encouraged, leaving the smiths to believe that the growing power belongs to their own understanding. But the rings are connected through principles reaching beyond any single workshop. The same instruction has entered 16 separate creations, and those creations now wait within a single design. The purpose of the work begun in S. A. 1500 remains hidden from the people who made it possible. A pale moon rests above the roofs, and the gardens hold the cool fragrance of wet earth. You sit near a courtyard fountain where water passes over a series of shallow steps. The sound rises and falls as wind moves through the surrounding trees. Farther away, a door closes, followed by the brief clatter of a tray carried across stone. The smell of quenched metal lingers near the workshops, mixed with the sweeter scent of oil lamps. On a covered bench, a single linen-wrapped ring rests in a wooden tray, its outline visible beneath the cloth. A flame burns beside it, reflected in a red stone and then in a darker blue one. The light does not reach the far corners of the arcade. Those corners remain soft, patient, and full of things not yet understood. The change begins when the elves perceive that one hidden hand has guided the whole enterprise. You stand with Celebrimbor as the signs gather into a shape that can no longer be dismissed as coincidence. The rings are not independent achievements, despite their different forms and intended recipients. Their making has followed a common pattern, and the knowledge behind that pattern belongs to someone whose identity has been concealed. Annatar's teaching has not merely improved the craft of Eregion. It has placed the guild houses within a design whose center lies elsewhere. Though made without Sauron's direct presence, the three are connected to the wider work through the knowledge that allowed them to exist. Celebrimbor understands the danger when the hidden hand becomes visible in thought, even before its name is spoken aloud. The workshops seem changed, though the walls and benches remain exactly where they were. You notice the lamps burning lower, the doors closing more carefully, and the apprentices speaking in quieter voices. Mithril's cold sheen appears beneath a guarded cloth, then disappears as the fabric is drawn across it. The charcoal fires give off little heat, and smoke clings to the still air. A red stone reflects a flame without warmth, while a blue stone holds the image in a darker, steadier color. Wooden trays are moved away from windows and placed inside cupboards. Every small sound becomes distinct, a hinge turning, a foot crossing the floor, a drop of water falling from a roof edge. After the last hammer stroke, the silence no longer feels peaceful. It feels watchful. When Sauron forges the One Ring, the elves understand the danger, because the hidden design becomes an instrument reaching towards all the others. You are present in the memory of that moment as knowledge travels from one house to another. The power intended to coordinate and control the rings reveals its true purpose, and the elves perceive that their creations can be influenced by a will outside their own. What seemed like shared craft now appears as preparation for domination. The distinction between preservation and command becomes unmistakable. Nenya, Narya, and Vilya were intended to protect, sustain, and preserve, but the One Ring seeks mastery over every lesser work. The danger does not arise from the beauty of the three. It arises from the hand that would gather all power beneath a single command. Night returns to Eregion beneath a sky without stars, and the city's lamps are covered against the darkness. You move through a narrow passage where the air is cool and the walls hold the smell of rain. Behind one door, a forge has been left banked beneath ash. Behind another, a bowl of water reflects nothing but blackness. Linen-wrapped rings lie in wooden trays, hidden under shelves and behind locked panels. The familiar scents of charcoal and quenched metal have become reminders of uncertainty. A small red stone gives back a weak point of flame, and a blue stone beside it seems almost colorless. Silence spreads through the rooms, broken only by wind pressing against the shutters. Somewhere beyond the city, Sauron's design is gathering strength. Celebrimbor responds by hiding the three rings from Sauron after perceiving his design. You watch the change in the household around him, where ordinary movements become deliberate and careful. Narya, Nenya, and Vilya are removed from places where servants, messengers, or anyone loyal to the stranger might find them. Their concealment is not theatrical. The rings are wrapped, enclosed, and carried through passages known to only a few trusted people. Celebrimbor does not place them among the 16 because their nature and purpose require different protection. He understands that the three were not physically touched by Sauron, but he also understands that knowledge may travel farther than touch. The rings must be hidden because the design surrounding them has become clear. The storage rooms are cold enough for the metal to retain the memory of the night. You stand beside a stone wall while a small lamp trembles within its dish. Beneath layers of linen, the rings lie in wooden trays, each cushioned with folded cloth. Mithril gives off a faint, cold sheen where one edge remains uncovered. The white stone of Nenya appears briefly, pale as winter light, before the linen is drawn across it. Nearby, charcoal dust gathers in the grain of the table, and the scent of quenched metal rises from a sealed basin. No hammer sounds from the neighboring workshop. The stillness reveals only the gentle movement of air beneath the door. In that narrow quiet, concealment becomes a form of protection. The elves do not suppose that the three will make their wearers invisible in the manner of the One Ring's later effect upon mortals. You see no fading figure, no vanishing body, and no doorway left empty where a person has stood. Their powers belong to preservation, protection, and the sustaining of what is fair and living. The One Ring's effect upon mortal wearers follows another course, drawing them towards invisibility and separation from the ordinary world. The three are not copies of that effect, and their wearers do not disappear merely by placing them upon their fingers. Their danger lies elsewhere, in the connection between their power and the greater design. Even hidden, they remain part of a history Sauron intends to master. At last, the three are carried away from Eregion and kept beyond Sauron's immediate reach. You travel with the concealed rings along roads softened by rain, leaving the workshops behind while the dark green hills close around the city. The journey is quiet, with no banners and no public announcement. Narya, Nenya, and Vilya pass beyond the walls in careful hands, their names repeated only in low voices. S.A. 1590 remains behind as a date of completion, while S.A. 1500 lies farther back as the year when the Greater Rings began. The 7 will later go to dwarves, and the 9 to men, but the 3 now move away from the place where their story first gathered. Eregion recedes beneath mist, and the hidden work continues beyond the reach of its maker's enemy. The road is damp beneath your feet, and the night air carries the clean scent of wet grass beyond the last houses. You hear the soft creak of leather, the muted steps of travelers, and the distant fall of water among the stones. A covered case rests close against a guarded cloak, its interior lined with folded linen. Inside, the 3 are protected from rain, dust, and every careless hand. Narya's red association seems almost present in the warmth of the bearer's clothing, while Nenya's white stone remains imagined beneath the darkness. Vilya, the ring of air and the greatest of the 3, travels in silence, surrounded by the moving breath of night. Behind you, the forges of Eregion are extinguished one by one. Before you, the road disappears into the hills. Beneath the red glow of Orodruin, far from the green roads of Eregion, you stand upon black stone warmed from below. The volcano of Mordor breathes through cracks in the earth, and the air carries sulfur, metal, and the dry bitterness of ash. No green hill softens the horizon here, and no quiet workshop gathers patient hands around a common table. You hear only the deep subterranean roar beneath Mount Doom, rising and falling like a vast creature asleep within the mountain. Across the iron slopes, ash settles in thin grey veils, covering every ledge and hollow. Red light moves across black stone as the furnace opens, then dims when the fire draws inward. The cold silence of the upper air cannot reach this place, where heat presses against your face and dark vapor curls above the ground. Somewhere inside Orodruin, a single purpose has been carried beyond the sight of the Elven smiths. In S.A. 1600, you watch Sauron enter the fires of Mount Doom with the knowledge gathered through the making of the rings of power. The work before him is solitary, deliberate, and concealed from every hand that helped shape the earlier rings. Within Orodruin, the volcano of Mordor, he prepares a vessel unlike the lesser works made in Eregion. He does not summon a circle of craftsmen, and no bright benches stand beneath open windows. Instead, you see one will directing the metal, the fire, and the hidden design. Sauron forges the one ring in the fires of Mount Doom, placing a great part of his own power within it. The ring is created to govern the other rings of power, its purpose resting upon the bond already woven between them. As the metal takes shape, the labor of many hands is drawn towards the command of one hand. A fellowship of craft becomes, in secret, an instrument of mastery. The chamber around you narrows into heat and shadow, its walls glistening faintly beneath the furnace's red reflection. Sulphurous air gathers low against the floor, and every breath seems to carry a taste of stone. The forge gives a dull, continuous throb, while small fragments of fire drift upwards and vanish before reaching the ceiling. Iron tools lie upon dark slabs, their edges dulled by smoke and repeated use. Your skin feels dry beneath the heavy warmth, and the fabric at your sleeves holds the smell of mineral dust. Beyond the chamber, the mountain continues its slow movement, sending tremors through the soles of your feet. Then the furnace closes, and the noise falls away with startling suddenness. In the hard silence that follows, you hear ash landing upon the stone, grain by grain. The stillness seems complete, although the power beneath Orodruin has not diminished. You remain close enough to see the ring cooling in the darkness, its surface holding a deep and steady color beneath the fading fire. The shape is simple, yet nothing about its making is modest. Sauron has placed much of himself within the gold, and the ring now carries a strength belonging both to its maker and to the design of the other rings. Its purpose is not merely to preserve, adorn, or strengthen. You feel the intention of governance within it, as though the circle has been shaped to close around every lesser will. When the one ring is completed in S.A. 1600, the other rings of power awaken to the presence of their master. Their makers may be far away, yet the connection between them becomes suddenly clear. The secret forging does not remain secret in its effects. Its completion reveals Sauron's identity and intention to the elves who wear the rings. At that same moment, Eregion lies beneath a different kind of light, pale and green upon the workshops and quiet roads. You walk among stone buildings where tools have been left upon benches, and the warmth of earlier furnaces remains within the walls. The elven smiths have worked through years of patience, sharing knowledge, testing alloys, and refining forms that once seemed beyond reach. Their labor has been communal, and the beauty of the rings has grown from conversation, observation, and trust. Now, without any messenger crossing the hills, each bearer feels the disturbance passing through the hidden bond. The rings seem to stir against the skin, and a knowledge older than spoken words reaches the minds of those who made them. Your steps slow upon the workshop floor, where bright filings gather beside cooling tongs. The atmosphere remains peaceful, yet its peace has become fragile. Eregion understands that its art has been bound into another's design. The red glow of Orodruin does not resemble the calm gold of an elven forge. It moves across the chamber in restless bands, shining upon tools, ash, and the dark folds of Sauron's garments. Volcanic heat rises through the floor, while a faint wind carries sulfur through the narrow passages. Fine ash settles on the iron slopes outside and gathers upon the rims of broken stones. From far below comes a deep subterranean roar, muffled by layers of rock, yet strong enough to vibrate in your chest. The ring lies within the firelight, small against the enormous mountain. Its size gives no measure of the power enclosed within it, and the surrounding darkness seems to draw attention towards its quiet surface. When the furnace closes once more, Silence fills the chamber with a weight that sound cannot explain. You stand beside the cooled iron and feel that the mountain has become a vault. The purpose of the One Ring becomes clearer through the simultaneous awakening of the other rings. The three made by the Elves are no longer separate works of preservation, and the 7 and 9 can no longer be understood as independent treasures. You sense a single order passing through them, a command seeking the wills that wear them. Sauron has designed his ring to govern the other rings of power, making his intention unmistakable. Those who wear the rings become aware that another mind has entered the structure of their art. Their craft has not been stolen in a simple physical sense, because the rings remain upon their hands or within their keeping. Yet the pattern of their making has been joined to a greater device. In S.A. 1600, you watch a hidden alliance of craft become an open struggle for mastery. The contest is no longer between friendly smiths seeking knowledge together. It is between the maker of the One Ring and every people that refuses its command. Eregion grows still as the smiths gather in rooms where lamps burn low against the gathering unease. The polished surfaces of tools reflect their faces, and the familiar smell of oil, metal, and heated stone has acquired a sharper edge. You pass beneath carved lintels and hear no cheerful discussion from the benches. Outside, the evening wind moves through the hollows, lifting dust from the road and carrying the distant scent of rain. Inside, the rings are held close, wrapped in cloth, or hidden beneath garments. The elves remove or conceal their rings rather than submit to Sauron's command. Their movements are careful, almost tender, because each ring represents years of thought and the friendship that once made its creation possible. Even without seeing the One Ring, they understand its authority. In the stillness between the workshops, you feel the burden of knowledge settling upon Eregion. The city has learned that its finest art can be turned against its makers. Sauron, possessing the One Ring, stands within Mordor as his power increases through the bond he has created. The strength invested in the ring returns to him in greater measure when he wears it, making his will more powerful than before. You see the change not as a sudden flash, but as a widening shadow over the land. His confidence no longer requires the manners of a counselor or the patience of a guest. The knowledge he offered to the elven smith has served its purpose, and courtesy now gives way to command. Across the eastern lands, his identity is openly proclaimed after the One Ring is made. The name of Sauron becomes inseparable from the will seeking mastery over the rings. The secrecy surrounding his instruction collapses, and the hidden teacher appears as the enemy of those who received it. In this moment, the craft of Eregion enters the history of war. Ash drifts over Mordor beneath a sky dimmed by smoke, and the red light from Orodruin stains the lower clouds. The ground beneath you is uneven, formed from old lava, broken slag, and layers of dust hardened by heat. Sulphurous air presses into every hollow, leaving the tongue dry and the throat faintly raw. Along the slopes, black stones retain the day's warmth while the wind above them turns cold. The mountain's subterranean roar travels through the earth in long, patient waves. Small fires appear within cracks and fade again, leaving glowing seams beneath a crust of charcoal. Nothing grows beside the paths leading towards the forge, and no bird crosses the upper air. You hear a scrape of metal, followed by a pause that seems longer than the movement itself. The furnace seals, and silence settles over the slopes. The elves of Eregion do not answer the One Ring with obedience. You watch them take their rings from their fingers or place them beyond the reach of any immediate command. The three are kept apart and guarded with particular care, because they are connected to the same design, yet remain untouched by Sauron's hand. He cannot directly control them because he has not touched them. Their makers used the knowledge he helped reveal, but their final shaping occurred without his physical contact. This distinction does not make them entirely free from danger, since their existence remains linked to the One Ring. Still, the three do not become instruments that Sauron can immediately direct. Around you, the elven smiths preserve them through concealment, distance, and silence. Narya, Nenya, and Vilya pass from ordinary sight into guarded keeping. The road from Eregion begins to carry not only travelers, but also the hidden future of the West. At night, Eregion lies beneath a thin silver darkness, and the roofs of Ost-in-Edhil gather dew where the air has cooled. The workshop doors are shut, though warmth remains in the stones around the furnaces. You smell quenched iron, damp earth, and the faint resin of wooden beams. Somewhere beyond the walls, a stream moves over shallow gravel, making a sound too soft to disturb the city. Curtains shift in narrow windows as the night wind enters through unseen cracks. Beneath cloaks and folded linen, the three remain hidden from the world. Their colors exist only in memory and imagination. Red warmth, white brightness, and blue depth held close against darkness. The elven roads appear peaceful beneath the stars, yet every road now seems to lead towards a decision. The quiet of the city has become the quiet of guarded knowledge. Far away, Sauron prepares the strength of Mordor for the struggle that follows. The One Ring is not made in Eregion, and its true birthplace remains the furnace of Orodruin, where no elven hand stands beside it. Its creation transforms the arrangement of power across Middle-earth. The ring's fate becomes tied to the survival of Sauron's embodied power, because the strength he placed within the gold is also a portion of his own being. As long as the ring endures and remains within his reach, it can enlarge his authority. If it is destroyed, the power invested in it will also be destroyed. You can imagine the consequence as a thread running from Sauron's body to the hidden circle of metal. The thread passes through armies, towers, roads, and kingdoms, binding them to a single object. Thus the fate of the ring becomes the fate of the Dark Lord's embodied power. The air over Eregion is cooler than the air within Mordor, yet unease gives the familiar landscape a strange weight. You stand beside a wall of pale stone where moss grows between the joints, and the scent of leaves rises from the gardens below. The evening sky fades through violet into blue, while the first stars appear above the distant hills. No smoke darkens the horizon, although a faint redness seems to linger in the minds of those who have felt the One Ring awaken. A shutter closes somewhere in the city, and footsteps cross a covered passage before becoming still. The tools upon the benches are clean, but many have not been returned to their proper places. Dust rests upon a hammerhead, and a thin strand of metal catches the last light beside an unused file. You hear the quiet breathing of the city, carrying on beneath the knowledge of danger. Sauron's open proclamation changes the meaning of every earlier meeting. You see the courteous figure who once entered Eregion replaced by a lord who demands submission. The elves understand that his teaching was never offered without purpose, and the rings of power were never intended to remain gifts. Their art has been directed towards a design that places Sauron above every bearer. The One Ring gives that design a center, a voice, and a will. Across the roads of the eastern lands, messengers carry news of the new enemy, while the elves keep their own rings hidden from his sight. The three remain concealed, and the other rings are treated with fear, caution, or resistance. No simple return to the earlier friendship is possible. A hidden alliance has become an open struggle for mastery, and the history of the rings now moves beyond the workshops where their forms were first imagined. The evening in Eregion grows dark by degrees, leaving a faint brightness upon the thresholds and garden stones. Moisture gathers upon the leaves, and the scent of grass replaces the sharper smells of the forge. You feel a cool current passing beneath your sleeves, carrying the distant sound of water through the narrow streets. The windows of the smith's houses glow with small lamps, each flame wavering against polished metal and pale walls. In one room, a cloth is folded over a ring. In another, a box is placed within a recess and covered by wood. The silence is not empty, because it contains lowered voices, careful footsteps, and the soft movement of hands protecting what cannot safely be displayed. Above the city, clouds gather over the hills and conceal the stars. The land appears gentle beneath them, though the future has already turned towards iron. Sauron's answer to resistance is not limited to words. You watch him gather forces in Mordor and direct them outward against the lands that have refused his authority. The conflict after S.A. 1600 spreads far beyond the original workshops, crossing plains, rivers, forests, and mountain passes. Eregion becomes one point within a struggle that reaches across Middle-earth. The ring's creation alters the scale of the danger, because control of the lesser rings would give Sauron influence over many peoples and rulers. The elves therefore keep their rings hidden, while armies move towards the western land. Sauron's power is strengthened by the One Ring, and his purpose is no longer concealed. The roads that once carried artisans and merchants begin to carry scouts, soldiers, and frightened refugees. What began beside the furnaces of Eregion now threatens every country touched by the ring's influence. A cold wind travels through the mountain valleys, although the heat of Mordor remains far away. You cross a stony path where the ground is dark beneath a film of ash, and the sky seems low above the jagged ridges. No trees grow in the exposed hollows, but small grey grasses bend where soil has gathered between rocks. The wind moves across your face with a dry touch, lifting powder from the slopes and carrying it into the red distance. Orodruin remains visible beyond the dark ground, its summit hidden beneath vapor. From time to time, a dull glow appears within the cloud, followed by a tremor too gentle to move the stones. The deep subterranean roar continues beneath the landscape, steady as a buried river. When it pauses, the silence feels vast enough to contain the whole eastern land. Eregion cannot withstand the full force of Sauron's desire for mastery. You see the elven smith turning from creation towards preservation, deciding which works can be carried away and which must remain concealed. Their city, once shaped by craft and friendship, becomes a place of danger. The three are removed from immediate reach, and their bearers withdraw from the command that flows through the One Ring. Sauron seeks them, yet he cannot directly control them because his hand never touched their making. This limitation does not spare the elves from war, nor does it free the three from the ring's wider bond. It gives only a narrow space in which resistance can survive. The memory of shared instruction remains bitter, since the knowledge was genuine, while the intention behind it was false. The smiths now understand that their finest achievement has become part of an enemy's weapon. At the edge of the ruined roads, dusk settles upon broken stone and abandoned gates. You hear no hammering from the workshops, and the air has lost the warm breath that once escaped through their vents. Rain begins lightly, darkening the dust and making narrow streams along the paving. The smell of wet rock rises beneath the fading traces of smoke. Leaves gather against walls, and the wind pushes them into corners where no one comes to clear them away. A strip of cloth hangs from a damaged doorway, moving gently whenever the air passes through. Beyond the hills, the sky carries a muted red reflection from distant Mordor. You cannot see the forge beneath Orodruin, yet the color seems to connect the two landscapes. In the quiet of the abandoned workshops, Eregion appears to hold its breath. The One Ring remains in Sauron's possession, and its strength increases his power while he holds it. You see the Dark Lord standing before the eastern lands with the confidence of one who has placed his own strength into a single instrument. The ring is not merely a symbol of his rule, because its power is part of him and returns to him through possession. Its destruction would also destroy the power Sauron has invested in it, leaving his embodied strength diminished beyond recovery. For this reason, the ring's fate is tied to the survival of Sauron's embodied power. Every battle fought over the ring becomes a battle over the persistence of the Dark Lord himself. Every attempt to hide it, preserve it, or destroy it carries consequences far beyond the object's size. The secret forged circle now stands at the center of a history that will last for ages. Night rests upon the land with different textures in each place. Over Mordor, smoke hides the stars and leaves the slopes faintly visible beneath Orodruin's glow. Over Eregion, the sky clears enough for cold constellations to appear between the clouds. You move in thought between these regions, feeling the contrast between volcanic heat and mountain air. In Mordor, sulfur clings to the stones, while in Eregion, rain lies upon moss and fallen leaves. The red light moving across black rock has no counterpart among the elven roads, where moonlight rests in pale bands upon the ground. Yet both landscapes are joined by the rings. A thread of power passes from the furnace to the workshops, from the hidden hand to the hands that withdraw. The distance between the places cannot dissolve the bond created in S.A. 1600. The construction of Barad-dûr rises alongside the forging of the One Ring. In S.A. 1600, you watch the great fortress of Mordor reach completion, its foundations set deep within the volcanic land. Dark walls climb above the surrounding plain, and towers gather around the central stronghold like the teeth of a vast crown. Barad-dûr is completed in S.A. 1600, at the same time that the One Ring is forged in Orodruin. The timing gives the year a particular weight, because the ring provides the will, while the fortress provides the place from which that will can command. Sauron openly proclaims himself after the One Ring is made, and the completed fortress gives his proclamation a visible shape. The elves of Eregion hear the meaning in both events. A ring has been forged in secret, and a fortress now stands openly above Mordor. The tower appears first as a dark outline against the red haze, then as a mass of walls and bridges rising from the plain. You smell ash before you reach the outer slopes, and the air becomes warmer with every step towards the fortress. Loose stones shift beneath your feet, making small sounds that vanish beneath the mountain's deeper voice. Fires burn within high openings, their reflections trembling upon black surfaces, polished by heat and labor. The wind carries grit against your face, and the taste of sulfur remains constant upon your tongue. Above you, clouds turn red around the unseen summit of Orodruin. Barad-dûr seems to absorb the surrounding light rather than reflect it. Beyond its walls, the land descends into darkness, marked by roads that spread towards distant kingdoms. The new fortress does not end the struggle. It gives the struggle a center. You see Sauron direct his forces from Barad-dûr, seeking the rings that the elves have removed or concealed. The elven smiths refuse to submit to his command, and the three remain beyond his direct control because he has not touched them. Yet the One Ring continues to govern the wider design, and fear of its reach spreads through every decision. The conflict after S.A. 1600 is fought across lands far beyond the original workshops. Armies pass through valleys where no ring was ever made, and rulers far from Eregion begin to feel the consequences of a craft they never witnessed. Rivers, forests, and open plains become part of the contest. The One Ring has carried the quarrel between two kinds of mastery into the larger history of Middle-earth. Rain returns to the roads of the west, softening the edges of old walls and filling the hollows between stones. You stand beneath a covered arcade where water falls in thin lines from the roof, each drop striking the pavement with a muted rhythm. The air smells of wet leaves, extinguished charcoal, and the clean mineral scent of the hills. A few lamps burn behind shutters, their light trembling upon the puddles. The road beyond the gate is empty, although marks remain where carts and hurried feet passed earlier. Somewhere beneath a cloak, a ring rests against folded linen, protected from rain, dust, and every careless hand. Naria's warmth belongs to memory, while Nenya's pale stone and Villia's blue brightness remain hidden in silence. Their hidden passage contrasts with the towering openness of Barad-dûr. The making of the One Ring has changed the meaning of all that came before it. You look back towards the workshops of Eregion and understand that their communal labor has been gathered into a solitary act of domination. The ring is made in Orodruin, not in Eregion, and its final purpose is shaped within the fires of Mordor. Sauron places a great part of his own power into the gold so that it can govern the other rings of power. When the elves perceive his identity and intention, they withdraw their rings rather than accept his command. Their resistance prevents him from directly controlling the three, because he has not touched them. Yet his power is increased while he possesses the One Ring, and its destruction would destroy the strength he invested within it. The ring's fate is now bound to the survival of Sauron's embodied power. The last light leaves the western hills, and darkness gathers over the empty roads. You hear rainwater moving beneath the stones, while the wind passes through abandoned doorways and lifts loose fibers from old cloth. The forge rooms are cold, their floors marked by ash and small fragments of metal. No flame remains behind the doors, and the silence extends through the sleeping city. Far away, the red glow of Orodruin continues beneath the smoke. It paints the lower clouds, then disappears when the mountain's vapor thickens. Barad-dûr rises beyond that darkness, completed in S.A. 1600, and standing above the land like a watchful shadow. The new age of war begins there, beneath the volcano of Mordor, while Eregion fades into the quiet of the western night. The first reports of war reached Eregion while the forges were still warm, and the smiths still believed danger might pass beyond the western hills. In S.A. 1693, the War of the Elves and Sauron began, though its first distant movement seemed no more than troubled rumors carried along the roads. Messengers came from Lindon with mud upon their cloaks and uncertainty in their voices. They spoke of armies gathering beyond Eriador, servants of Sauron moving beneath dark standards, and old friendships becoming unreliable beneath the pressure of fear. Within Osten-Edhil, the craftsmen continued their work, measuring gold wire, shaping silver settings, and examining stones beneath steady lamps. The city still possessed its ordered beauty, with broad ways between pale houses and workshops built around quiet courtyards. The Myrdain had not abandoned their tools, and Celebrimbor remained among them, listening to each report in grave stillness. The three rings had already been hidden from Sauron that year, carried beyond the reach of the power that had deceived their makers. Their absence was known only to a few, and their secrecy became a fragile shelter around the elves of Eregion. Rain lay over the western road in a fine silver veil, turning the packed earth dark beneath the hooves of hurried horses. Water gathered in hollows between stones, and passing feet broke the surface into small, trembling circles. You are near the city gate, where wet cloaks release the scent of wool and leather, and where the air carries a faint sweetness from distant orchards. Behind you, hammers rise and fall within the workshops, their measured sound softened by rain. The clouds press low against the surrounding hills, and the last light rests upon them like pale ash. A cart creaks through the gate with bundles of charcoal beneath a dripping canvas. Somewhere beyond the walls, a raven calls once, then falls silent. The road glistens beneath marching feet, while mud clings to sandals and iron-shod boots. Along the parapet, water slips from the stone in narrow threads, passing over carved leaves and worn faces. The city smells of damp earth, quenched metal, cedar beams, and lamps burning behind shuttered windows. For a time, the smiths hoped Eregion might remain untouched by the armies gathering in the east. Their hope arose not from ignorance, but from habit, pride, and confidence grown through generations of craft. Eregion stood within a land shaped by skill, and the elves of Osten-Edhil had long believed that beauty, discipline, and guarded friendship could preserve a country from the worst disorders of the world. News from distant places, often arrived with travellers who departed again before their anxieties settled into the streets. Celebrimbor understood more clearly than many that the rings had changed the balance of the lands around him. Sauron had entered their work under a fair appearance, and although his presence had been discovered, his influence could not be removed from every object already made. The three were hidden, yet the 9 and the 7 remained in Eregion. Their locations were no longer merely matters of craftsmanship, because each ring now carried the danger of becoming a weapon in another hand. At the western harbour of Lindon, the tide moved beneath a colourless morning. Elrond prepared to travel east under the authority of Gil-galad, High King of the Noldor. The king had received reports from Eriador and understood that Eregion could not be left without aid. He sent Elrond from Lindon with soldiers, provisions, and whatever mounted messengers could be spared from the coast. The departure was quiet, with no gathering of crowds and no ceremonial brightness. Packs were fastened, bowstrings checked, and horses stood patiently beneath the salt-stained wind. Beyond the harbour, grey water lifted and fell against the stones. Seaweed mingled with pinewood from the wagons, and the ropes tightened with a low, creaking sound. You stand beside the road as the company leaves Lindon, watching cloaks darken beneath the rain. The western country recedes behind you in fields washed clean by weather. Streams have widened across the lower paths, and every wheel leaves a shining groove in the earth. As the days pass, the road toward Eregion grows heavier with traffic. Travellers move westward with possessions covered in blankets, while families lead tired ponies through the wet. A child sleeps beneath a woolen cloak, and an old elf carries a small wooden chest against his breast, as though it contains the last room of his house. By S.A. 1695, Sauron's forces had entered Eriador, and the distant war became a presence felt beneath every ordinary movement. Reports now arrived with greater regularity, and none suggested that danger would pass around Eregion. Villages east of the city had been abandoned, farms left with doors unbarred, and watchtowers emptied before the advancing armies. Some refugees spoke of smoke rising behind them, while others had seen only black riders moving along ridge lines. The uncertainty was almost as disturbing as the confirmed destruction, because no one knew which road remained open or how long it would stay safe. Elrond's company travelled through this unsettled land, gathering more people with every mile. The soldiers continued east, although the road became crowded with those moving in the opposite direction. They passed wagons bearing household vessels, folded cloth, carved chairs, and boxes of books. Many refugees possessed little more than a cloak and a bundle of food. Their faces carried the stillness of those who had not yet found a place where fear could loosen its grip. The wet road receives each footfall with a subdued sound, as though the earth itself were breathing beneath the burden. Rain has darkened the leather of travel bags, and droplets gather along the edges of shields. A mule shakes its head, sending water from its mane in a brief glittering arc. The scent of crushed grass rises from the verges, mingled with horse sweat and wet iron. At night, the company rests beneath trees where the ground is only slightly less saturated than the road. Pine needles soften the sleeping places, though cold continues to enter through every seam in the blankets. You hear quiet conversations among the refugees, interrupted by green wood crackling and the occasional movement of animals. The eastern horizon remains dark even when dawn begins elsewhere, and distant fires appear and vanish behind the ridges. Within Oster-Nedhill, the workshops became places of hurried labour, and the remaining rings were gathered for concealment or defence. Celebrimbor ordered the city's stores examined and its gates strengthened. The smiths carried tools from the lower rooms into chambers with thicker walls, while apprentices packed unfinished work into wooden crates. Gems were wrapped in wool, silver vessels buried beneath floors, and records divided among trusted hands. The old confidence of the Myrdain had not wholly disappeared, but it had changed into careful concentration. The three rings remained hidden from Sauron, guarded by silence rather than walls. The 9 and the 7 were more difficult to protect. Their beauty made them valuable, while their power made them dangerous. Sauron had sought them from the beginning, and the elves knew he would not abandon the search merely because his armies had reached Eriador. Elrond drew nearer to Eregion each day, but the distance between Lindon and Ost-in-Edhil was increasingly filled by disorder. Messengers rode ahead and returned with news of broken bridges and enemy movements. The company crossed streams swollen by rain and followed tracks where carts had sunk to their axles. The eastern road no longer seemed to lead towards a city prepared for battle, but towards a place already surrounded by war's consequences. A pale sun appears briefly between the clouds above the city, catching upon the wet roofs. Smoke hangs over the houses of Ost-in-Edhil, rising from chimneys and forges where work continues despite the alarms. The stone streets shine beneath a thin layer of rain. Water runs along the gutters, carrying ash, fragments of leaves, and tiny curls of metal from the smithies. You pass beneath an archway where carved patterns have been darkened by soot. Splintered doors lean against a wall, removed from houses that have been searched or emptied. Scattered gemstones lie in the mud near a broken workshop window, their colors dulled beneath grit and rain. No one stoops to gather them. The sounds of hammering have grown fewer, and each blow seems separated from the next by a long interval of listening. Sauron's armies advanced through Eriador with a force the defenders of Eregion could not match. The war had begun in S.A. 1693, but decisive pressure came after the enemy entered Eriador in S.A. 1695. Forces gathered east and south of the city, cutting roads and threatening settlements that had supplied Ost-in-Edhil. Some defenders were drawn away to guard bridges and crossings, while others remained upon the walls, watching dark lines of troops form beyond the fields. Elrond reached Eregion with the strength Gil-galad had entrusted to him, yet his arrival could not restore the old balance. He brought experienced warriors from Lindon, allowing the defenders to hold several approaches longer than expected. Still, Sauron's armies were numerous, and their commanders had time to study the city. They did not need to break every wall at once. They could close the roads, burn outlying homes, and let hunger work alongside fear. Within the city, Celebrimbor and the Myrdain continued to protect what remained of their craft. The workshops grew colder as fuel became scarce, and windows were covered to hide the glow of lamps. Scribes copied names and inventories by hand, knowing the original records might soon be lost. In the upper rooms, the three rings were remembered as a secret entrusted to the future. Evening settles over the roofs with a damp, copper-colored light. Smoke from the forges spreads low across Ost-in-Edhil, gathering beneath the heavier clouds. It smells of charcoal, wet stone, and oil used to preserve leather. From the walls comes the scrape of shifting armor, followed by the subdued murmur of men and elves changing their watch. Below, narrow lanes have filled with carts and abandoned household goods. A clay jar has broken against a doorstep, leaving pale fragments among blackened straw. Rain taps upon the lid of a chest, while water drips from a torn banner fixed to a leaning pole. Smoke softens the outlines of the towers, and the city seems less like a place built by hands than a shape remembered through mist. Years of pressure gathered around Eregion until its final defense became unavoidable. By S.A. 1697, Sauron's armies had reached Ost-in-Edhil, and the city fell beneath their assault. The defenders held the walls and streets as long as their strength allowed, but the enemy entered through breaches where stone had been shattered and gates burned. Elrond's forces fought towards the eastern roads, attempting to preserve a path of retreat for those who could escape. Celebrimbor remained within the city with the last defenders of the Myrdain. The house of the Myrdain stood among the workshops where the greatest works had been formed. and its steps became the place of his last stand. There, among fallen stones and broken tools, he faced the advancing soldiers while the city burned behind him. The battle moved slowly through familiar spaces. Courtyards that had once held quiet conversations filled with smoke and splintered wood. Workshop doors were struck apart, and the streets became crowded with ash. Celebrimbor fought upon the steps of the house of the Myrdain, retreating only when the defenders around him had fallen. His resistance did not save Osten-Edhil, but it delayed the taking of the house and guarded its last secrets a little longer. The stone steps are slick beneath your feet, their pale surfaces marked by rain and darkened blood. Smoke drifts between the buildings, blurring the lamps and turning each flame into a soft amber halo. You feel heat upon one side of your face and cold rain upon the other. The air carries the bitter taste of ash, beneath which lies the familiar scent of resin from the wooden doors. Broken tools rest in the street, their handles blackened and metal heads dulled. A hammer has fallen beside a shallow channel of rainwater, and each passing drop trembles against its surface. Near the house of the Myrdain, fragments of coloured stone glimmer beneath the mud. They appear whenever the firelight shifts, then disappear beneath soot and flowing water. Celebrimbor was captured after the city fell, and Sauron demanded the location of the rings kept by the Elves. The struggle within the house of the Myrdain had ended. Celebrimbor had been separated from the remaining defenders and taken through streets he had known since childhood. He was brought before Sauron among the ruins of Osten-Edhil, where the conqueror sought the knowledge that had given Eregion its importance. Sauron demanded to know where the Elves had hidden their rings. He wanted the three above all, because they had been made without his direct touch and remained beyond his sight. The 9 and the 7 were also valuable, representing both power and proof of the craft he had tried to control. Celebrimbor refused to reveal the hiding places of the 3. His answer was not a speech carried through the streets, but a silence and refusal repeated under questioning. The city had fallen, the workshops had been opened, and the treasures of the Myrdain lay exposed, yet the secret of the 3 remained outside Sauron's grasp. In S.A. 1697, amid the ruin of Osten-Edhil, this refusal became the last act of resistance within the city. Rainwater moves through the gutters beneath the ruined houses, carrying ash towards the lower ground. The sound is soft but continuous, like a thread drawn through darkness. Smoke still lies over the roofs, and firelight reveals walls stained with black trails. You stand near a courtyard where paving stones have been cracked by falling beams. A door hangs from one hinge, moving slightly whenever wind enters the passage. Nearby, gemstones have spilled from a shattered container and rest among fragments of glass. Their surfaces hold the colors of green leaves, red berries, and winter water, though soot has muted their brightness. Wet charcoal settles into the clothing of everyone who passes. Somewhere inside a damaged hall, a loose chain taps against stone at measured intervals. Sauron seized the rings that could be found, but the 3 were not among them. The 9 and the 7 were taken from the city. They were carried away under guard, wrapped in cloth or placed within small chests, while the workshops were searched for every object that might conceal another treasure. The hands that had made the rings could not prevent their removal, and the rooms where they had once been studied became empty. Sauron did not find the 3. Their hiding places had been kept secret, and no threat could persuade Celebrimbor to betray them. This failure did not lessen the destruction inflicted upon Eregion. Instead, it deepened Sauron's anger, because the most important objects had escaped him, while the city itself lay under his command. Celebrimbor was killed after refusing to betray the 3. His death followed the fall of Osten-Edhil and the seizure of the rings, when Sauron could gain nothing further by keeping him alive. The refusal endured beyond the life of the smith who had guarded it. S.A. 1697 marked the destruction of Eregion, but also the preservation of a secret that would shape the later history of Middle-earth. The captured rings are placed within wooden cases, darkened by handling and smoke. Ropes tighten around the lids, and iron fittings knock against one another as the cases are lifted. You watch the procession move through the broken gate, with soldiers carrying Eregion's burdens eastwards. Behind them, rain settles upon the ruins and makes every surface gleam. Inside the abandoned workshops, benches are coated with dust and splinters. Bowls of polishing powder have overturned across the floor, forming pale drifts beside scattered gemstones. Fine filings of gold and silver cling to the cracks between the stones. A cold draught moves through the broken doors, carrying pine from the hills and the heavier odor of smoke from Ostinedhill. The silence after the departure is not complete because water continues to fall from the roofs and embers shift beneath the wreckage. Yet the old sounds of craft have ended. No hammer measures the hours, and no voice calls from one chamber to another. Eregion was laid waste by Sauron's forces, and the survivors moved westwards beneath a sky filled with smoke. The destruction extended beyond Ostinedhill. Farms, roads, and small settlements were burned or abandoned, while trees were cut down to supply the engines and fires of the advancing armies. Land that had once supported the city became a corridor of mud, ash, and broken wagons. Elrond gathered as many survivors as he could and led them away from the ruins. The retreat from Eregion was slow because refugees carried children, elders, tools, food, and whatever fragments of former lives could be moved. Some traveled on foot, while others were supported between companions. Wet roads became crowded with those escaping the violence, as Elrond's soldiers guarded the rear and watched the ridges for pursuit. The three rings remained hidden, though their keepers were scattered. The 9 and the 7 were already in Sauron's possession, carried away with the other spoils of the city. Celebrimbor was dead, the house of the Myrdain broken, and smoke over Ostinedhill could be seen for many miles behind the retreating company. The road bends through woodland where rain has collected upon the branches. Each movement releases a shower of droplets, and wet leaves brush against cloaks and packs. You walk among refugees whose steps have become slow and careful. Mud rises around the ankles, while small stones press through worn soles. A wagon wheel turns with a tired wooden groan. Its rim is dark with water, and its spokes carry strands of grass gathered from the roadside. Beneath a covered frame, a child's breathing remains even despite the jolting path. Damp wool fills the space between travelers, along with crushed fern and the sharp green fragrance of pine resin. Behind the trees, smoke rises from the direction of Ostinedhill. It spreads across the sky in a long grey band, hiding the hills and reducing the west to a dim outline. No one speaks of returning. The road continues beneath the rain, and the company follows Elrond towards a place not yet chosen. Elrond established Imladris during the retreat from Eregion, seeking a refuge that could be defended and hidden from Sauron's forces. The valley lay beyond difficult ground, enclosed by steep slopes and reached through narrow approaches. It offered water, trees, and shelter, though it was not yet a settlement. Refugees arrived in stages, and the first shelters were made from canvas, branches, and salvaged boards. Fires were placed beneath overhangs, while sentries watched the paths descending from higher ground. Elrond named the refuge Imladris. In later ages, it would be called Rivendell, but during those first days, it was simply a hidden valley where the survivors of Eregion could rest. The place held no grandeur at the beginning. Its importance came from safety, memory, and the decision to preserve a people whose home had been destroyed. Work began with practical tasks. Stones were cleared from paths, shelters strengthened, and stores counted. Smiths who had escaped carried smaller tools into the valley, though many great instruments of Eregion had been lost. Among the refugees, grief moved quietly, often expressed through silence rather than lamentation. The memory of Celebrimbor remained with them, along with the knowledge that the three rings had escaped Sauron. The valley receives the retreating company beneath a softer rain. Water runs over rounded stones in the riverbed, gathering silver light from the clouded sky. Pine resin warms in the cool air, releasing a clean fragrance that clings to the bark and mingles with wet moss. You stand beside the river where branches hang low over the current. Water moves around stones with a muted, patient sound, and fallen needles drift upon the surface before turning into a dark pool. The ground is firm beneath the trees, unlike the saturated road behind you. Blankets hang from ropes between trunks, and small fires send thin columns of smoke into the damp air. At dusk, the valley becomes blue and quiet. The first lamps appear near the shelters, reflected in the river as broken lines. Wind passes along the slopes without entering the deepest hollow. Pine resin remains beneath every other scent, and the water keeps moving while the refugees sleep. The fall of Eregion did not end the war, because Sauron still sought to extend his power across the western lands. After Ostirnedhil was destroyed, Sauron's forces continued their advance through Eregion. The Elves of Lindon prepared their defences, while messengers travelled along the coast and inland roads. Gil-galad understood that Elrond and the survivors of Eregion could not hold the enemy alone. The war had grown beyond one kingdom and become a struggle for the future of the western lands. In Imladris, Elrond organized the survivors and kept watch upon the eastern approaches. The valley was concealed by surrounding hills, yet concealment could not guarantee safety if Sauron's armies continued westwards. Refugees arrived with news of villages abandoned and roads seized. Each report brought the smoke and ruin of Eregion closer to those who had escaped. The three rings were still hidden from Sauron, and knowledge of their survival was carefully guarded. Their absence from the captured treasures remained a source of danger, because Sauron would continue to search for them. The loss of the Nine and the Seven reminded the elves that even a hidden object might be reached through force. The river widens where the valley floor becomes level, moving beneath alders and tall grasses. Moisture gathers upon the leaves and falls in slow drops whenever branches shift. You hear the muted rhythm of work around the shelters, small hammers striking, boards being sawn, and people calling softly as they carry water. Pine resin glows like amber where it has hardened upon a wounded trunk. Its fragrance is warm and clean against the cooler smell of river stones. A woven blanket rests over a low branch, its wool roughened by travel and darkened at the edges. Beyond the trees, the slopes rise into mist, forming a natural wall around Imladris. Night brings no distant glow from the ruined city. Only the stars appear when the clouds separate, and their light rests upon the river in narrow, trembling paths. In S.A. 1700, help came from across the sea when Númenorian forces entered the war against Sauron. The ships belonged to the men of Númenor, whose power had grown through long years of ordered rule and seafaring strength. King Tarminastir sent an army westwards after learning of the danger facing the elves. Their arrival altered the balance of the war, because Sauron had extended his forces through Eregion and now faced an enemy greater than the defenders he had expected. Númenorian soldiers came ashore beneath banners brightened by salt and wind. Their armor, provisions, and disciplined ranks strengthened Gil-galad's resistance. From Lindon, the combined forces moved against Sauron's armies, pressing them back through the lands they had occupied. The war begun in S.A. 1693 now turned against the power that had seemed close to conquering the West. Tarminastir's forces defeated Sauron and drove him back towards Mordor. The retreat was hard and violent, leaving roads damaged and fields trampled, but Sauron could no longer maintain his advance. His armies withdrew eastwards, abandoning positions and stores as they moved towards the lands beneath Orodruin. In the hidden valley, news arrived slowly, carried by riders whose horses were covered in foam and mud. The refugees did not celebrate loudly. They listened, remembered the dead, and allowed the possibility of safety to enter their thoughts. Far to the west, sea wind moves around the Númenorian ships. Salt clings to the ropes and darkens the wooden rails, while oars rise and dip in a steady rhythm. You stand upon the shore near Linden, watching the vessels return beneath a sky cleared by evening. The sound of oars reaches the harbour before the ships themselves, joined by the low wash of water against their hulls. Wet leather, tar, and salt fill the air. Seabirds move above the masts, their cries softened by distance. The sails hang heavy after the journey, and droplets fall from their lower edges. The harbour stones are slick beneath your feet, shining beneath the last light. Coils of rope lie beside the quay, rough and damp, against the hands of those who gather them. Beyond the breakwater, the western sea stretches into a pale horizon. The returning ships carry the weariness of war, but also the knowledge that Sauron has been driven back. In Imladris, the river continues through the valley, and pine resin scents the air around the new shelters. The ruined workshops of Eregion lie far behind, filled with splintered doors, scattered gemstones, and cold fires. Yet the memory of their craft has not vanished. The three rings remain hidden. Sauron has not found them, and the refuge beside the river begins to gather a quieter life. The people of Imladris set stones into paths and timber into walls, building patiently beneath the shelter of the hills. No great city rose in a single season. Rooms were added as materials became available, and each new roof protected those who had slept beneath branches or canvas. Elrond established Imladris as a refuge, but its deeper character came from the care given to memory. Songs, records, tools, and stories were preserved because Eregion had shown how quickly a culture could be scattered. Among the survivors, the name Celebrimbor was spoken with restraint. He had made the rings, guarded the secret of the three, and died after refusing to betray them. The 9 and the 7 were gone, taken by Sauron from Eregion's ruins, but the 3 remained beyond his reach. Their survival carried both consolation and unease. The war had not erased Sauron. Tar-Minastir's forces had defeated him in S.A. 1700 and driven him towards Mordor, yet the power beneath Orodruin still endured. The western lands had gained time rather than permanent peace. In that interval, Imladris became a place where the wounded history of the Elves could remain alive. Morning enters the valley through a high opening between the slopes. It touches the river first, then the roofs, then the damp trunks of the pines. Mist lifts from the water in thin layers, revealing stones polished by the current. The air is cool, carrying pine resin, wet bark, and the faint smoke of breakfast fires. You pass a newly built doorway whose frame is still pale from fresh cutting. The wood feels rough beneath your fingers, and small curls of shavings cling to the threshold. Beyond it, voices remain low, and the rooms hold woven blankets, clay vessels, and tools rescued from Eregion. A stream crosses beneath a simple footbridge, its sound hidden beneath the deeper movement of the river. The valley seems enclosed from every side, but the sky above it remains open. Clouds travel over the peaks, casting slow shadows across the grass. Water gathers upon fern leaves, and droplets brighten whenever light reaches them. The refuge rests among these quiet details, while the distant war recedes towards Mordor. The fall of Osten-Edhill became a dividing line between the world of the great smiths and the long years of guarded endurance. Before S.A. 1697, Eregion had been a centre of making, exchange, and intellectual ambition. After Sauron's forces laid it waste, survivors carried its knowledge in fragments. Some went to Linden, some to Imladris, and others travelled farther into lands where they could remain unseen. The city itself was no longer a living centre, though its ruins continued to influence the history of all who had depended upon its craft. The capture of the 9 and the 7 ensured that Eregion's consequences would extend far beyond its borders. Sauron had not found the three, but he had gained objects capable of binding other wills to his own. Celebrimbor's refusal preserved the secret, while the destruction of his city placed the rest of the ring lore in enemy hands. Elrond's retreat became the foundation of Rivendell. Imladris stood in a valley of water and pine, hidden from the open roads and strengthened by those who had lost their homes. Its peace was not the peace of forgetting, but of careful remembrance. Evening settles over the valley with calm, translucent light. The river reflects the upper branches, and the current carries small leaves beneath the bridge. Pine resin has hardened into golden beads along the trunks, releasing a faint sweetness where the bark has been cut. The ground remains soft from rain, though the paths have been packed firm by many passing feet. You hear distant work from the houses, followed by the gentle closing of a wooden shutter. A lamp is placed near a window, and its glow spreads across the floorboards. The smell of warm bread moves through the cool air, mingling with wet stone and smoke. Above the valley, the first stars appear between drifting clouds. Far away, the roads of Eriador remain scarred by armies. Near you, water moves steadily through Imladris, and the valley gathers darkness without fear. The war begun in S.A. 1693 brought loss to Eregion, but it also scattered the elves into places from which later resistance could grow. The three rings were hidden in the year the war began, and Sauron never discovered where they lay. In S.A. 1695, his forces entered Eriador, bringing conflict close to the homes and roads of the Western Elves. In S.A. 1697, Osten-Edhil fell, Celebrimbor made his last stand upon the steps of the House of the Myrdain, and Eregion was laid waste. After the fall, Celebrimbor was captured and questioned. He refused to reveal the hiding places of the three, and Sauron seized the 9 and the 7 that remained in Eregion. Celebrimbor was killed for that refusal, while the 3 most closely guarded rings remained beyond the Conqueror's search. Then, in S.A. 1700, Tar-Minastir's Númenorian forces arrived from the west. They defeated Sauron and drove him towards Mordor, allowing the survivors to strengthen Imladris beneath the protection of its hidden valley. The years of war had not ended the danger, but they had changed its shape. Night deepens beside the river, and the sound of water becomes the clearest presence in the valley. Pine branches move above you with a slow, dry whisper, while damp earth cools beneath the settled grass. The last fires burn low near the shelters, their embers pulsing beneath a layer of ash. You can smell resin upon the air, along with wool, smoke, and the faint mineral scent of the riverbank. A wooden tool rests against a wall, its handle smooth where many hands have held it. Nearby, a small stone from Eregion has been placed upon a windowsill, its color visible only when the lamp beside it brightens. Beyond the valley, the sea continues to carry the memory of Númenorian ships. Salt wind passes over distant waters, and oars rest within vessels drawn up along the western shore. The sound of that ocean is far from Imladris, yet the road between them remains open. Beneath the stars, the refuge grows quietly, while the ruins of Eregion sink into the dark. The black sails rise from the storm-dark sea, while Númenor breaks behind you, its towers sinking beneath a whitening wall of water. Elendil stands upon the deck, silent beneath the rain, and around him the faithful gather with whatever strength remains. You feel the vessel lift upon the waves, then descend into a hollow between mountains of black water. Behind your ship, the island disappears beneath the downfall of S.A. 3319. Elendil has escaped with his sons, Isildur and Anarion, and the ships carry fragments of a kingdom towards Middle-earth. The wind tears at the rigging, while the sea throws salt across the faces of those who have lost their homes. No harbor appears through the darkness, yet the fleet continues eastward. Far ahead, beyond the storm, the shores of the Anduin wait beneath an unfamiliar sky. Cold rain lies upon the decks, turning the timber smooth beneath your hands and darkening the ropes, until they seem almost black. The sails strain overhead with a low, continuous groaning, and each mast bends slightly before recovering against the wind. Water gathers in the hollows between the planks, trembling whenever the ship rolls across a deep swell. The smell of pitch mingles with wet wool, salt, and the faint sharpness of iron fittings. Around you, cloaks cling to shoulders, and pale faces appear whenever lightning opens the clouds. In those brief illuminations, the black sails stand against the storm-dark sea like pieces of night drawn into the sky. Beneath the deck, chests shift softly in their restraints, carrying tools, records, seeds, and household things that give Exile a human shape. Even the oars remain secured, waiting for calmer water and a coast. The ships reach the mouth of the Anduin, where the river spreads into pale channels between reed beds and low islands. Elendil guides the fleet inland, following waterways known to Númenorian mariners from earlier voyages. The river bears you beyond the salt flats, into a country of broad horizons and distant hills. At Pelargir, the great haven established in S.A. 2350, the survivors find keys, storehouses, and foundations made by their own people, long before the downfall. Pelargir stands upon the Anduin as a major Númenorian haven, and its harbour receives the black sails with quiet readiness. Isildur watches the eastern banks, while Anarion studies the rising land towards the west. Elendil understands that the ships have brought them not merely to safety, but to the beginning of another order. The exiles unload beneath a clearing sky, carrying their grief into a land where new names will soon be spoken. Pale morning spreads across Pelargir, making the wet keystones glimmer like dull silver beneath the clouds. The river moves slowly beside you, broad and brown, carrying leaves, broken reeds, and small circles left by falling rain. Behind the harbour, timber frames rise among older walls, while fresh-cut beams release a green resinous sent into the damp air. Mooring ropes creak against their posts, and distant gulls call from the sandbars where the river meets the sea. The black sails hang slack now, their edges dripping steadily from the night's passage. Men carry casks across the quay, while women arrange bundles beneath awnings patched from travelling cloth. Along the water, the Anduin reflects fragments of pale sky, never holding a complete image for more than a breath. Pelargir feels both familiar and foreign, a preserved memory standing upon a shore that has become home. From Pelargir, the new realm takes shape in two directions, following the natural division of the land and the movement of the rivers. Elendil travels northward and establishes Arna in S.A. 3320 beneath the long mountain horizon of Eregion. Isildur and Anarion remain in the south, where Gondor rises beside the Anduin, with its roads, towers, and fertile plains. The kingdoms are joined by blood, memory, and Elendil's authority, although distance gives each one its own character. In the north, the hills grow gentle around the settlements, while the western lands open towards the sea. In the south, the white mountains stretch beneath a sharper sun, and the eastern horizon darkens towards Mordor. Arna and Gondor become paired realms, divided by leagues of road, yet connected by the same Númenorian inheritance. You stand between their imagined borders, sensing how rivers, mountains, and old grief help to draw the map. A dry wind moves through the southern plain, carrying the scent of grass, river mud, and stone dust from distant works. Gondor's towers rise gradually, their pale surfaces brightening as masons place one block upon another. Fresh-cut stone lies beside the roads in uneven heaps, cool and rough beneath your fingertips, with chisel marks still visible along its edges. The Anduin passes through the land like a wide grey ribbon, reflecting the changing light beneath the eastern sky. Far beyond the river, the mountains form a blue and solemn wall, their summits partly hidden beneath thin cloud. Cart wheels turn slowly over packed earth, while hammers sound from unfinished gates and courtyards. At sunset, the stone takes on a muted rose colour, and the first lamps appear within the towers of Gondor. The work continues after darkness, guided by small flames protected from the wind. Isildur takes the eastern side of Gondor and founds Minas Ithil upon the borders of Mordor, where the land rises towards the shadowed passes. Its name, the Tower of the Moon, carries a beauty that seems almost delicate beside the dark country beyond. Anarion establishes Minas Anna west of the Anduin, beneath the protection of the White Mountains and the open light of the western plains. Between the paired cities lies Osgiliath, Gondor's chief city, built across the river and joined by bridges, streets and halls. From Osgiliath, the realms of Isildur and Anarion can be seen together, one looking east towards Mordor and the other west towards the mountains. The three cities form a living centre for Gondor, with Minas Ithil guarding the shadow, Minas Anna facing the light, and Osgiliath holding the river between them. Elendil remains the High King, while Anarion governs Gondor jointly with him. Evening settles over Osgiliath in layers of violet and grey, softening the outlines of its bridges and riverside walls. Beneath the arches, the Anduin carries the reflections of lamps in broken golden lines, trembling whenever a boat passes below. The stone streets retain the day's warmth, but the parapets grow cool beneath your palms as night deepens. From Minas Anna, faint bells travel across the water, while the eastern towers answer with smaller sounds from their watchposts. The air smells of river reeds, lamp oil, horse leather, and the clean mineral scent of newly shaped stone. Above the roofs, the White Mountains hold the last pale glow of sunset, while the lands beyond Minas Ithil become a dark, indistinct mass. Osgiliath remains awake between these opposing horizons, its houses and halls gathered around the river like a hand protecting a flame. Years pass across the kingdoms, and the shadow of the Second Age lengthens, while Gondor strengthens its roads and fortresses. In Númenor, royal names increasingly turn towards Adunaic forms after Orodruin becomes king in S. A. 3110. The change in language reflects a deeper change in spirit, as the old friendship with the Eldar weakens and pride grows within the island realm. By the time Ar-Pharazôn lands in Middle-earth with a great army in S. A. 3261, Númenor still possesses immense wealth, ships, and military power. Sauron does not meet that force in battle, but surrenders to Ar-Pharazôn in S. A. 3262 and is taken to Númenor. You watch the news travel along the coasts and river roads, carried by sailors who speak of a defeated enemy brought across the sea. Yet the victory conceals a danger, for Sauron's body is captured while his will remains unbroken. Along the harbour walls, the air grows heavy beneath a sky without stars, and the tide touches the pilings with a patient wooden knock. Merchants lower their voices when they mention Númenor, as though the island itself might hear its name across the water. Tarred ropes lie coiled beside bronze rings, and the scent of wet timber rises whenever the river wind shifts. In workshops near the quay, lamps burn behind horn panes, casting blurred shapes upon walls marked by years of salt and smoke. The eastern horizon remains clear, but the west is hidden beneath a low bank of cloud. No messenger can describe the future Sauron has carried into the royal halls, and no chart shows the depth of the sea beneath Númenor. You feel the waiting in the harbour, not as fear, but as a stillness that has entered the ordinary movements of trade. Within Númenor, Sauron's council leads the king towards forbidden power, and the island's ancient order turns against the Valar. The fleet is prepared, the banners are raised, and the sea opens before Ar-Pharazôn as he seeks to challenge the Guardians of the West. Then, in S. A. 3319, Númenor is destroyed in the downfall, and the sea closes over its cities, fields, and towers. Elendil and his sons escape because they have preserved their loyalty to the Eldar and the old wisdom, sailing eastward before the final ruin. Their vessels arrive in Middle-earth, carrying the seeds of kingdoms that will endure. Elendil founds Anna in the north, while Gondor takes shape in the south, and the memory of Númenor becomes both inheritance and warning. The island is gone, yet its language, laws, craft, and grief remain within the people who have crossed the water. From S.A. 3320 onwards, exile becomes the foundation of kingship. Autumn rests upon the northern roads, where the grass has taken on the faded color of old gold and fallen leaves gather against the stones. Anna's settlements appear beneath a spacious sky, their roofs dark with rain and their walls pale against the low hills. The air carries wood smoke from distant houses, and the ground yields softly beneath each measured step. To the south, the imagination follows the Anduin through forests and open country, towards the towers of Gondor and the river city of Osgiliath. To the east, beyond Minas Ithil, the mountains of Mordor remain hidden behind distance, though their shadow seems present in every account brought by travelers. The two kingdoms are separated by land, but their roads preserve a quiet correspondence. Riders carry seals, letters, and reports between them, while stonemasons, soldiers, and families continue to shape a shared realm beneath separate skies. The years of rebuilding become decades of preparation, and the rulers of Gondor watch the eastern borders with increasing care. Minas Ithil stands upon the threshold of Mordor, its walls bright beneath the moon, and its towers directed towards the passes. Minas Anna guards the western side of the Anduin, while Osgiliath remains the chief city between them, filled with traffic and voices from many regions. In S.A. 3429, Sauron attacks Gondor and captures Minas Ithil, turning the Tower of the Moon into a hostile gate. The news reaches Osgiliath through riders covered in dust, and the city's bells carry the alarm across the river. Isildur is forced to flee, while Anarion holds the western kingdom and gathers strength for the struggle ahead. Mordor has opened its hand, and the eastern darkness now reaches directly into Gondor's ordered landscape. The long preparation for war becomes a matter of survival rather than policy. A cold eastern wind crosses the fields around Osgiliath, lifting dust from the road and pressing it against the lower walls. The river is swollen from distant rain, and its surface moves in long, dark folds beneath a colorless afternoon. Soldiers carry bundles of arrows beneath covered passages, while smiths work at anvils whose ringing fades into the wide spaces between the buildings. On the eastern bank, the road towards Minas Ithil lies almost empty, marked by wheel ruts and occasional hoofprints filled with muddy water. Fresh-cut stone waits beside a half-finished tower, each block wrapped in a thin skin of pale dust. The smell of iron, leather, and extinguished charcoal settles among the houses. At dusk, lamps appear along the bridges, but fewer lights burn towards the captured city. Osgiliath holds the center, and the center listens for movement in the dark. The need for allies draws Elendil and his people towards Gil-galad, High King of the Noldor, whose realm in Lindon faces the Western Sea. In S.A. 3430, Gil-galad and Elendil form the last alliance of elves and men, joining two peoples whose histories have been marked by loss. Their agreement is not a sudden gathering, but the result of years spent preserving strength, sending messages, measuring roads, and preparing supplies. From Anna, soldiers travel south along the Greenway, while Gondorian companies gather beside the Anduin and beneath the mountains. Elven forces come from Lindon, bringing long memory, disciplined ranks, and weapons made in lands that have already suffered ruin. Gil-galad and Elendil stand together at the head of the alliance, their standards lifting above the assembled host. You see them not as figures rushing towards battle, but as rulers who have waited until waiting can no longer protect the world. Across the western roads, the marching host moves beneath a sky of thin cloud and clear, pale light. Leather straps creak, horses breathe steadily, and the wheels of supply carts press deep lines into the damp earth. Standards lift in a cold eastern wind, their colours folding and opening above the columns like slow-moving wings. Elven armour catches the sun in narrow glints, while the shields of men bear marks from many different houses and valleys. Grain, water, timber, and arrows travel with the soldiers, arranged in careful quantities because the road ahead will not be brief. At night, fires burn in sheltered hollows, and the smell of boiled grain mingles with trampled grass. Messengers ride between camps, carrying orders from Gil-galad and Elendil through the darkness. The army grows not through spectacle, but through repetition, patience, and the quiet labor of thousands. The armies of the last alliance cross the Anduin and move towards the plains before Mordor, where the enemy has gathered beneath the shadow of the Erd Lithui. In S.A. 3434, the alliance meets Sauron's forces at the Battle of Dagorlad. The ground becomes a place of dust, trampled grass, broken shafts, and churned mud, extending beneath a sky crowded with smoke. Elves and men advance together, their lines holding beneath the pressure of enemies drawn from Mordor and its allied lands. The battle lasts through long hours, and the plain absorbs the colors of banners, blood, and fading daylight. At last, the armies of the last alliance defeat Sauron's forces at Dagorlad, forcing the survivors back towards the Black Gate. You cross the field after the fighting, stepping around shattered shields and abandoned helmets while the wind moves through the crushed grass. Victory has opened the road, but the road now leads towards Barad-dûr. The plain of Dagorlad lies beneath a copper-colored evening, its dust suspended in the still air after the armies have passed. Trampled grass forms dark mats across the ground, and broken spears protrude at angles from the soil like remnants of a dead forest. Leather, sweat, damp earth, and smoke mingle in the heavy atmosphere, while wounded horses shift uneasily beyond the main encampment. Standards stand torn along the ridge, their cloth snapping whenever the cold eastern wind returns. Water is carried from shallow pits, though it tastes of clay and iron. In the distance, Mordor's mountains appear as long, black shapes beneath the cloud. The quiet after battle is never complete, because carts move, armor is repaired, and names are called beside the fires. You remain among the fallen plain while the alliance gathers itself for the greater labor of the siege. The army advances through the Black Gate and enters Mordor, where the land narrows beneath mountains that seem to close around the road. Sauron withdraws towards Barad-dûr, the Dark Tower, and the last alliance follows until the fortress stands within sight. In S.A. 3434, the armies besiege Barad-dûr, surrounding its walls and cutting the roads that sustain it. The siege does not become a single dramatic contest, but a long season of pressure, engineering, watchfulness, and exhaustion. Towers are raised, trenches extended, and stones hauled across ground exposed to the enemy. Elendil and Gil-galad direct the work, while Anarion commands the forces of Gondor and maintains the lines between the eastern approaches and the western camps. Isildur remains close to the struggle, carrying the memory of Minas Ithil and the loss of his city. Barad-dûr endures above them, black against the poisonous sky, while the alliance waits for its walls to yield. Around the siege camp, the land of Mordor offers little relief from its harshness. Ash settles upon cloaks, tents, and uncovered food, forming a grey film that returns whenever it is brushed away. The ground is hard in some places and strangely soft in others, retaining the warmth of buried fires beneath its crust. Beyond the trenches, the fortress rises through haze, its surfaces absorbing what little light reaches the plain. Banners lift and fall in the cold eastern wind, while watchmen speak in low voices from platforms built of timber and stone. At night, the stars disappear behind smoke, and the camp glows with shielded lamps placed beside piles of tools. Somewhere beyond the walls, engines move with slow mechanical groans. Beneath the noise, You hear the small sounds of siege life. A whetstone drawn over metal, a buckle tightened, a cup set upon a board. Seasons move across the siege, and the alliance remains before Barad-dûr while strength is measured against time. Gil-galad's elves endure the long watch with quiet discipline, and the men of Gondor hold their positions despite hunger, wounds, and the weight of memory. Anarion continues to rule Gondor jointly with Elendil during the years before the last alliance, carrying responsibility through the same labor that sustains the army. From the western lines, messages travel towards Minas Anna and Osgiliath, where the kingdom waits beneath guarded skies. From the east, the ruins of Minas Ithil remain a reminder of what the enemy has already taken. The siege becomes a world of routines, with dawn inspections, repairs at midday, and night watches beneath smoke. Each completed trench and raised wall brings the army closer to victory, although Barad-dûr appears as distant from defeat as it did on the first morning. Rain reaches the camp in thin, cold sheets, darkening the canvas and drawing narrow streams through the ash. The scent of wet leather rises from the shelters, mixed with damp wood and the mineral sharpness of stone. Men and elves move carefully between the trenches, boots sinking into softened ground where the water has gathered. Armor dries slowly beside low fires, and droplets remain caught within engraved patterns on shields and breastplates. From the fortress comes a dull vibration that travels through the earth before it can be heard in the air. The rain blurs the edges of Barad-dûr, leaving only its highest towers visible against the blackened sky. At intervals, a standard lifts above the tents, soaked fabric pulling heavily against its pole. The camp rests without surrendering its watch, and the cold water continues to fall upon the long work of war. At last, the siege presses inward, and the armies begin the slow movement towards Orodruin, the mountain of fire where Sauron has placed the foundation of his power. The road is broken by lava fields, ravines, and slopes covered in red dust, while the air grows hotter with every league. The alliance advances in ordered stages, protecting its supply lines and carrying the wounded away from the front. Elendil leads the men, Gil-galad leads the elves, and Anarion remains among the Gondorian commanders. Isildur moves beneath the memory of Minas Ithil, whose towers once watched the same mountains from the north. The mountain rises ahead, not like a distant landmark, but like a presence that changes the color of the world. In S.A. 3441, the final struggle reaches the slopes of Mount Doom. The ring remains with Sauron, and every step towards Orodruin draws the armies towards the hidden center of the age. Heat gathers beneath your armor as the path climbs through fields of black stone and brittle red earth. Ash moves across the ground in small spirals, entering seams in leather and settling along the rims of helmets. Exhausted soldiers lean upon spears during the pauses, while horses stand with lowered heads and dusty flanks. The air smells of sulfur, burnt rock, and old smoke rising from cracks in the land. Above, Orodruin sends a red glow into the clouds, making the underside of the sky resemble heated metal. The standards of the Alliance lift unevenly in the wind, their cloth stained by dust and rain. No birds cross this country, and the silence between commands is filled only by the shifting of armor. Beneath Orodruin, red ash gathers around your boots while the mountain breathes through hidden passages below the earth. The armies confront Sauron upon the slopes of Mount Doom, and the final battle becomes a struggle among stone, fire, and exhausted soldiers. Elendil carries Narsil, the sword of his house, while Gil-galad bears Eglos, whose spear has endured the long road from Lindon. Their presence holds the alliance together as the forces of Mordor press around them. Sauron comes forth in a form of terrible strength, and the ground shakes beneath the violence of the encounter. Elendil and Gil-galad fight beside one another, joining the traditions of men and elves at the last edge of the Second Age. In S.A. 3441, Sauron is defeated upon the slopes of Orodruin, though the victory costs both kings their lives. You see Elendil fall, and Gil-galad fall with him, while the mountain throws red light over the broken field. The great enemy lies overthrown, but the danger has not yet ended. Ash drifts through the air like dark snow, settling upon the bodies, the shields, and the red stones beneath Orodruin. Armor lies in dull heaps where its owners have fallen, scratched and blackened by heat, while surviving soldiers move with the slow gestures of men beyond exhaustion. The mountain glows through rents in the cloud, and each distant rumble causes loose fragments of rock to tremble along the slope. Iglos is gone, and Narsil lies broken beside Elendil, its fragments catching brief reflections from the fire below. Gil-galad's standard has fallen among torn spears, its colors difficult to distinguish beneath the ash. The cold eastern wind has weakened here, replaced by hot currents rising from the mountain. You breathe through cloth and taste smoke upon your tongue, while the earth beneath you gives a faint, irregular shudder. Isildur comes to the fallen king and takes the hilt shard of Narsil, then uses the broken sword to cut the one ring from Sauron's hand. The power sustaining the Dark Lord collapses, yet the ring survives, held now by Isildur rather than destroyed within the fire of Orodruin. The armies of Mordor break, Barad-dûr begins to fall, and the long Second Age reaches its end. The last alliance has achieved a victory beyond the hopes of those who first gathered in S.A. 3430. Dagorlad has been won, the siege has succeeded, and Sauron has been cast down upon the mountain. Still, the ring remains a small and weighty object in Isildur's hand, bearing the memory of the enemy it has outlived. Around you, the great war ends without becoming complete. The heat fades slowly from the upper slopes, though the ground beneath the ash retains its deep and restless warmth. Broken armor rests among black stones, and the smell of sulfur grows sharper whenever the mountain releases another breath of smoke. Far below, the ruined fields of Mordor disappear beneath veils of dust, while the western sky begins to pale beyond the mountains. A few standards remain upright, their poles planted in ground too hard for ordinary tools. The red light beneath Orodruin touches the edges of helmets and sword fragments, giving each object a brief, uncertain outline. Silence gathers in the spaces where commands once traveled, interrupted by falling stone and the subdued movements of the wounded. At the foot of Mount Doom, victory has no clear brightness, only fatigue, ash, and the small darkness of the ring. The age has ended, but its shadow remains within your hand. In the years that follow, the fall of Sauron becomes a boundary in memory, dividing the Second Age from the long histories that come afterwards. Númenor is remembered beneath the sea. Arna and Gondor continue the line of Elendil, and the names of Isildur and Anarion remain joined to the founding of the southern realm. Pelagia still stands beside the Anduin, while Minas Ithil, Minas Anna, and Osgiliath remain linked across the river and mountain horizons. Yet the ring passes onwards, carrying its hidden danger through lands that believe the war has ended. The defeat of Sauron is real, and the destruction of his armies is complete, but the One Ring has survived. You stand beneath the quieting slopes of Orodruin while the last red glow withdraws into the clouds. Around you, the dust settles upon the exhausted armor, and the road into the future opens without revealing where it leads.